Chapter 712. The high-speed Gundam summonly quickly found the shuttle that was taking advantage of the fierce battle between the Freedom Gundam and the Earth's Outer Orbit Command Fleet to break into the Earth's atmosphere. Sure enough, they're still playing this kind of trick. Mr. K, are you there? Galileo glanced at the shuttle that was constantly zoomed in on the screen after being locked on by the radar. It wasn't difficult to see that the shuttle obtained enough speed before fishing fire entered Alien's monitoring range. It shut down the engine and glided close to Earth due to inertia. Otherwise, it would be difficult to avoid the monitoring of Alien and the Earth Orbit Unified Fleet. I'm here. Mr. Galileo, is it over there? When Lu Lucio's voice sounded, Schwalb's signal also appeared in Gauda Monli's radar detection range. No, we have to hurry. I'm afraid Calta can't stop the attack. After personally experiencing the power of Freedom Gauda's high-frequency vibration blades, Galileo almost didn't have any hope that the Earth Orbit Unified Fleet could buy him time. Now, the only thing he could do was to take advantage of the short opportunity created by Freedom Gauda being held back by Calta and the others to capture or even destroy the shuttle. This was the key to determining the final outcome of this battle. Although this is a bit of a blow to the morale, I don't think the Iron Flower Regiment is a team that will only rely on that mysterious body. Lu Lucio seemed to think that Galileo's thinking might be a bit too much. Lu Lucio glanced at the shuttle that had discovered them and quickly opened the top cover, then said very calmly. Galileo frowned, and the screen in front of him suddenly lit up with a strange yet familiar signal. This is the signal of the Ahab furnace. No. It's the identification signal of the body used by the Mars branch in the database. Is it the body captured by the Iron Flower Regiment on Mars? Looking at the identification signal that popped up in front of him and comparing it to the database, Galileo's heart suddenly burned with anger. Although he did not know the reason for this anger, he knew that it would be a great humiliation to Lars Horn if this mech continued to appear as the MS of the Iron Flower Regiment. But now, Galileo had more important things to do. That was to get rid of the shuttle as soon as possible. Only in this way could the battle end as quickly as possible. If things continue to drag on like this, Galileo could hardly believe what would happen to Calta and her fleet in outer orbit. Mr. K, although it's a little abrupt, can I entrust that mech to you? Galileo took a deep breath and made the necessary arrangements. No problem. Lu Lucio's response was straightforward. However, Galileo didn't know that when Lu Lucio agreed to his request, a hint of mockery flashed across his eyes. "Oh la la la, my grand entrance. Watch how my meteor kills all of you." Perhaps influenced by Ray Mingkai and Gao Da's activities, Seno, who had just mastered Grez, couldn't wait to join the battle and show off his ability. Sure enough, he's just a kid. However, Lu Lucio saw how Sino excitedly controlled the Quten Type 3 that was carrying Gretz, the meteor. Therefore, a mocking smile appeared on Lu Lucio's face. Da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. Far away. As soon as the Quten 3 entered Schwalb's maximum range, Lu Lucio decisively controlled the 120mm rifle and fired several short bursts. It was strange. Sino had already noticed Schwalb's attack and had taken the appropriate measures to deal with it. But strangely, he couldn't avoid Schwalb's attack. The 3 short bursts of bullets almost hit the Quten 3 that was dodging at high speed. In the blink of an eye, the Quten 3's propulsion system was destroyed by Schwalb, and its speed dropped to its lowest. What happened? I clearly dodged it. Seno couldn't understand what happened. He subconsciously separated Grez Quten 3 from the Quten 3 and subconsciously controlled the Quten 3 to quickly sink under it. Da-da-da. Another burst of short bursts of bullets. The bullets seemed to have eyes as they headed straight for the Quten 3. If it wasn't for the Quten 3 in between them, the Quten 3 would have already fled under Schwalb's attack. Boom! The Quten Type 3 that could not withstand the attack exploded. The violent explosion gave the Quten opportunity to catch a breath. What is going on? The enemy's attack seems to have eyes. Seno crazily racked his brain, trying to understand what happened. He's still too young. I didn't expect there to be such a young person among the knight's favorites. Lucio's face was calm, and his hand was still pulling the trigger. From afar, Schwalb seemed to be holding the end of the rope, and the Kutan 3 was being pulled by the rope, allowing Schwalb to pull the rope as he wished. The Kutan 3 was easily driven by him, gradually increasing the distance between them and the Kutan 4. Senno, damn it, is that guy being held back? Does Lars Horn have such a powerful pilot? In the shuttle, Olga, who was sitting in the pilot's seat, gritted his teeth. He didn't expect the Kutan 4 to be in such a difficult situation. How about we let Akihiro help Senno? Biscat suggested cautiously, but this suggestion was rejected by Olga. No, Akihiro can't leave the shuttle. We just have to hold on. We just have to hold on until the free Gouda returns. Olga really wanted to accept Biscat's suggestion, but he knew that this was a critical moment. If the Gouda Gusaion that Akihiro was piloting left the range of the shuttle, then the hidden enemies would definitely rush out and destroy the shuttle on the spot. This concern was no longer a concern, because when Olga rejected Biscat's suggestion, the Gouda Samanli was already captured by the Gouda Gyujin's radar. Is that Lars Horn's new body? Akihiro didn't quite understand the words displayed on the screen, but from a feedback from Alea's system, Akihiro knew the name of the body that was attacking. Gouda Skeleton. Samanli? Akihiro muttered Samanli's name silently, but his lips suddenly curled up. So what? Enemies should be killed. In the blink of an eye, the Gouda Gyujin's head opened, revealing the high-sensitivity sensor wrapped in the head armor. This was one of the modifications used to allow long-distance sniping. When the high-sensitivity sensor was activated, the Gouda Gusaion could provide long-distance support or sniping. As a matter of fact, the 300mm smoothbore cannon that was specially arranged for the Gundam Gusaion was raised and aimed at the Gundam Samanli that was attacking from afar. Beep, beep, beep. In the pitch-black void in front of Akihiro, a blood-red cross lit up, and he decisively pulled the trigger. Boom! The moment the bullet fired by the 300mm smoothbore cannon shot out into space, the powerful recoil was also fed back to the Gundam Gusaion. But the Gouda Gusaion wasn't afraid of the recoil that normal bodies couldn't resist. Instead, he fired one after another at the Gouda Samanli. Boom! Boom! In the blink of an eye, dazzling fireballs exploded in front of the Gouda Gusaion one after another, cutting off Gao, the Samanli's escape route. It seemed like it also devoured the Gundam Samanli that was launching an attack. In fact, the long-distance bombardment by the Gouda Gusaion was out of Galio's expectations, but it didn't cause much damage to the Gouda Samanli. A second after the 300mm smoothbore cannon fired its first round of shots, Galio reacted quickly and controlled the Gao, the Samanli, to descend. He flew past the bombardment and directly below the Gouda Gusaion. For the Gouda Samanli, who had greater mobility than the Gouda Gusaion, this was just a piece of cake. However, something that surprised Galio happened one after another. Galio, who originally thought that he could launch an attack from below, suddenly realized that the moment the Gao de Samanli raised his lance, the Gouda Gusaion, who was supposed to continue firing, suddenly lowered the 300mm smoothbore cannon in his hand and fired continuously at the Gouda Samanli. This seemingly useless attack made Galio's scalp go numb, because as long as the Gundasaman continued to advance, he would definitely charge into the sea of cannons and be beaten up by the Gundasaman who would seize the opportunity. At that time, even if he didn't die, he would probably pay a heavy price. Galio, who had managed to stop the Gundam's charge in time, muttered subconsciously as he felt lucky. Is this the power of Alea's sense? My movements were actually seen through by the opponent? The shock only lasted for a moment. Galio knew very well how fatal it was to be in a daze during a battle, especially when his movements were very likely to be seen through by the opponent. Galio would never allow himself to be beaten up or even killed because of a moment of distraction. As Galio regained his composure, the propulsion engine under the feet of the Gao de Samanli shone brightly, constantly giving Gao de Samanli more speed and allowing him to escape from the shooting range of Gouda Gusaion. Galio. No. Both sides knew very well that once the Gao de Samonli successfully escaped from the shooting range of Gao de Gussion, the outcome of the battle would inevitably be different. His speed is really fast. However, compared to the free Gao de Samonli, it's still slow. The speed of the Gao de Samonli was getting faster and faster, but Zhao Hong remained unmoved. Because he had already seen and even personally experienced the speed of the Gao de Samonli, which was even faster and stronger than the speed of the Gao de Samonli. As long as he was slightly careless, Zhao Hong and Gao de Gussion would not even have the power to attack. But when facing the Gao de Samonli, Zhao Hong knew that he had a lot of opportunities, even more than when facing the speed of the free Gao de Samonli. Opportunity, right here. Zhao Hong, who only had the Gao de Samonli in his eyes, silently waited for an opportunity. An opportunity that the Gao de Samonli delivered to his door. From the battle, just now, Zhao Hong had already seen the general performance of the Gao de Samonli. Since it was a type that leaned towards close combat, then the Gao de Samonli would certainly not let go of any opportunity to get close to the Gao de Samonli and violently attack. Even if this sliver of opportunity was the flaw that Gundam Gussion and Zhao Hong had sold. Boom! Sure enough, the moment the 300mm smoothbore cannon of Gao de Gussion suddenly stopped firing, the Gao de Samonli was like a fly that smelled blood. After circling around in the air, it raised a lance in its hand and directly charged towards the Gao de Gussion. Its speed was as fast as lightning. It's coming. In front of him was the Gao de Samonli, but Zhao Hong's mind was inexplicably filled with Rei Ming Kai's word from before. Zhao Hong, if you encounter the Gao de Samonli, then the moment it charges forward, it will be the moment when the Gao de Samonli strikes. One strike? Can it be done? Rei Ming Kai's words echoed in his mind, but Zhao Hong's heart gradually calmed down. Close. Close. The sharpness of the sharp lance caused Akihiro's eyes to hurt, as though before the lance could even pierce him, Akihiro would be pierced through by the sharpness of the lance. Chance! The moment when his eyes were about to be unable to bear the sharp light, Zhao Hong felt that an opportunity was coming. So, he decisively pulled the trigger. Boom! The moment the recoil of the 300mm smoothbore cannon raised the muzzle again, the shell that rushed out of the muzzle headed straight for the Gundam Samonli that launched a frontal assault. The momentum was so strong that Galio couldn't react in time. Boom! A violent explosion rang out. Countless armor fragments were shattered and sent flying by the shockwave, set off by the explosion. They rolled endlessly into the endless void or slid down into the atmosphere below until they were burned to ashes. Success. The 300mm smoothbore cannon's muzzle was still smoking, and Zhao Hong was gasping for breath. The attack, just now, seemed like nothing, but the pressure Zhao Hong was under was unprecedented. Good job, Zhao Hong. This time you passed. At this moment, a light wing descended from the void and landed in front of Gao de Gussion. It was free Gao de Gussion. The Freedom Gundam raised its right hand, revealing its tattered body in its entirety. That's it. Major Galio Larshorn. Zila, there was a strange voice in his ears, but in front of Galio's eyes was a broken screen, and from time to time, electric sparks and blood droplets were floating in the cockpit. Enduring the severe pain, Galio saw the broken body in free Gao de Gussion's right hand from the broken and shaky screen. In an instant, he was stunned. His previous premonition really came true. The Earth's Outer Orbit Command Fleet, led by Calta, not only failed to stop free Gao de Gussion, but they also lost their lives. What to do? Galio clenched his fists tightly, but a sharp pain pierced his heart. It turned out that his right hand was pierced by a piece of broken glass. That bone-deep pain almost made Galio's heart stop. Mr. K, let's go. The operation failed. Calta Ishio was captured by the Iron Flower Regiment. Although he didn't say much, Lu Lucio already understood Galio's meaning. Understood. Behind a short answer, Lu Lucio looked at free Gao de Gussion with deep meaning. Let's meet again on Earth. Night. Chapter 713. Kikik. The violent vibrations were accompanied by waves of shaking, awakening Kalta, yet Hugh, who was in a coma. When she opened her eyes, the scene in front of her was the cramped cockpit, as well as the shaky, broken screen that was sometimes clear and sometimes covered in snow. Kalta did not understand the situation she was in at the moment. But with the recovery of her memory, Kalta finally remembered the scene not long ago. The sword slashed down like a bolt of lightning, cutting off the attack launched by Knight Gretz, and even knocked him into the black abyss where he lost consciousness, causing him to lose consciousness and fall unconscious. Battle. That's right, battle. The recovery of her memory allowed Kalta to quickly find what she could and should be able to do at the moment. Her hands quickly pressed a few keys on the keyboard, and the broken screen in front of her flickered a few times. It was no longer as clear as before, but it was enough for Kalta to see her surroundings. Fiery red light, scorching flames that burned everything. The moment the screen was restored, Kalta saw the scene filled with flames. What was going on? Kalta was stunned and did not react for a moment. Behind the flame, there seemed to be a deep darkness, and the looming blue light at the bottom of the lens made Kalta's heart tremble a little. As the ripples in her heart spread, Kalta's hands moved again and again, trying to arrange more scenes that could respond to the program she started. But in the end, in Kalta's impression, all the main scenes that could monitor the situation outside were all lost. How is this possible? In the previous battle, the unconscious Kalta did not know that her body had been turned into a human stick by the free Gauda, leaving only the broken body. No, there are also auxiliary scenes. Yes, there's also that. Kalta, who accidentally remembered the auxiliary surveillance cameras, successfully used the few auxiliary surveillance cameras on the broken body that still responded to the program. But in the next second, the scene presented in front of Kalta shocked her. A golden V-shaped antenna. It was completely different from the style of Lars horn that Kalta was familiar with. It was a head with more human characteristics, and a pair of golden electronic pupils that faintly flowed with golden light. This was the scene Kalta saw from the broken screen. As soon as she saw this scene, Kalta's memory began to become active. In the previous fierce battle, the figure of the body that once arrogantly and unreasonably attacked the Earth's outer orbit quietly appeared and gradually overlapped with the scene in front of Kalta. Have I been captured? A shocking fact that Kalta could not accept seemed to have been placed in front of her. Suddenly, Kalta, who could not accept all this, subconsciously changed the camera again, but unexpectedly, she had a clearer understanding of her environment. Flames. Flames again. However, behind the flames was no longer the deep darkness. Instead, half of the scene was occupied by the blue sky. At this moment, Kalta understood. Now, she was in the environment she was not familiar with space, but she was in a device that was rapidly breaking through the Earth's atmosphere. What, damn it? Kalta clenched his teeth and cursed under his breath. She understood now. Except for her landline that could still keep her alive for a period of time, the other functions of her landline had been lost. In this case, her broken body was still in the terrible situation of falling into the atmosphere. If this continued, Kalta yet Hugh would inevitably burn up in the atmosphere and become the most ridiculous existence among the younger generation of Gjallarhorn's heirs. However, the resentful Kalta seemed to have forgotten one thing. Now, she could still switch the auxiliary camera on her broken body to observe the surrounding situation, which proved that she would not be burned by the atmosphere. Because in a place where the auxiliary camera could not see, there was a shield from Gouda, which blocked the burning from the atmosphere. The flames that Kalta saw were just bursts of flames when the atmosphere burned Gouda's shield. It wouldn't affect her at all, nor would it affect her broken body at all. Angle adjustment complete. Entering the target orbit, estimated to arrive above the target in 5 minutes. Compared to the angry Kalta, Ray Minkai's expression was much more relaxed. It was not the first time for Ray Minkai to break through the atmosphere alone. After setting up the landing program, Ray Minkai had the time to pay attention to the shuttle that was landing not far away. From the scorching flames, Ray Minkai could see the meteor and Gauda Gusion that fixed him on the shuttle. Barbados did not attack. Ray Minkai looked left and right, but he did not see Gauda Barbados. Right now, because of the black barrier caused by the atmospheric breakthrough, he could not contact the shuttle. Forget it. I should know later. As Lei Minkai watched the shuttle's porthole being gradually closed by the heat shield, he temporarily shelved the idea. The flames were still spreading. As the landing program reached the most crucial step, the flames that burned the shield were no longer satisfied with burning the shield itself. Instead, it spread to Gauda's shoulders, legs, steel wings, and even the iconic golden V-shaped antenna were not spared. The burning from the atmosphere finally came to an end. With the disappearance of the black barrier that blocked the communication between the Freedom Gundam and the shuttle, the atmospheric battle had come to an end. Russell, Russell, Russell. This is... Olga. Freedom. Gauda. Can you hear me? The second after the black barrier disappeared, the intermittent communication was transmitted from the shuttle to Gauda. This is Freedom Gauda received. Seems like we have arrived on Earth. The blue sky, those a vast and endless sea, and the cool sea breeze with a trace of salty taste made Kalta, who walked out of the cockpit, have the illusion of surviving a disaster. Her imagination of being burned to ashes by the atmosphere did not happen. Instead, she was brought to this small island by the Freedom Gundam that had broken through the atmosphere on its own. Born on Earth, Kalta naturally would not be unfamiliar with these seascapes. But at this moment, she who was already familiar with these seascapes strangely felt a trace of strangeness. Woman over there, raise your hands. Don't move. Suddenly, a childish voice sounded, followed by the sound of a few bullets being loaded. Kalta looked over and actually saw 2 or 3 little boys pointing their guns at her. Children? Pointing their guns at me? Amidst the astonishment, Kalta's anger also rose. Do you know what you are doing? I am the commander of the Earth's Outer Orbit Command Fleet. Kalta, yet you little brats actually dare to point at me like this? Kalta's stern appearance made the children stunned for a moment, but soon their childish faces showed an angry expression. I don't understand this, but we know you're Lars Horn's people. Raise your hands. Otherwise, we won't be polite. Kalta did not expect to be refuted by the little brats. She ignored the threat of the dark muzzle, jumped down from the Gray Knight commander's body, and quickly rushed to the front of the little brats. Then, under the surprised look of the little brats, she reached out and pressed the muzzle pointed at her. Let go of me. These things are not something you little brats can take. Let go of me. Lars Horn's woman. Stop. Just when the two sides were about to have a more intense conflict, an unfamiliar voice interrupted the conflict between Kalta and the little brats. Ryder, go help unload the cargo. Leave it to me here. The little boy who was pressed down by Kalta frowned, but he still did as he was told. Good, let's go. Ryder, who forcibly took back the rifle from Kalta, left with his little friends without looking back. There was no longer the tit-for-tat look like before. On the other hand, after looking at Ryder's back, Kalta frowned and looked at the person who came. You're their leader? Why did you let the little brats pick up the rifle? This is their way of survival. From Lars Horn's 7 Stars family, you family's eldest daughter. Don't use your traditional way of thinking to measure their existence. Before Kalta could finish her sentence, the man interrupted her again. Kalta's frown deepened, but she understood the situation she was in. They had mysteriously but safely broken through the atmosphere and landed on this small island. All these factors pointed to one fact. She had been captured. What? Not talking. I thought the eldest daughter of the Yu family would be a domineering person. Why are you so quiet now? The person smiled lightly, as if he was expecting Kalta to resist fiercely. Kalta did not answer the person's question, but subconsciously moved her eyes to observe the situation around her. On the right was the blue ocean, and on the left was the beach and coconut forest. Behind the newcomer, apart from the coconut forest that extended toward the seaside, there was a steel body standing behind the coconut forest. Is that the body? Kalta immediately noticed the severely burned shield on the left arm of the body, as well as the burn marks on the shoulder armor and the golden antenna. That's the free Gouda. At the same time, it's the body that brought you from space to Earth. As for me, I'm its pilot. The person noticed Kalta's gaze and casually introduced Gouda. You're the pilot of this body? Hearing this fact, Kalta's nerves tensed up, and she subconsciously took a few steps back. Sort of, but I advise you not to step back anymore. Otherwise, my partner may be frightened. If something happens, I'm not responsible. Behind, a huge shadow shrouded Kalta in it. She subconsciously looked back and saw a majestic white lion standing on the broken steel body, looking down at her. In the pair of golden pupils, there was no light of humanity, nor was there a thirst for blood. There was only indifference, as if Kalta was an insect. That's my partner, State Zero, and my name is Mecha, the eldest daughter of the Seven Stars family. I'm happy to inform you that from now on, you're a captive of the Iron Flower Regiment. Clang! The glass of water was slammed against the wall by Galileo. He was very angry now, but also very helpless. All the actions did not achieve the expected results. What happened was the unprecedented loss of the Earth's Outer Orbit Command Fleet, in a scene where Galileo was forced to watch Gouda and Kalta break into the atmosphere in front of him. Battleship, even the loss of the pilot, could be compensated for. However, the fact that Kalta, the heir of the Yu family, was captured was the biggest loss of this battle. The serious procedure was undoubtedly a direct slap to the face of Lars Horn and the Seven Stars family. Damn it! When can we land on Earth? Galileo let out a roar. Calm down. Sir Galileo, I've already notified Sir McGillis. I believe there will be a disappearance soon. As soon as Lucio's voice fell, a communication came from the bridge. Galileo, Mr. K, I've received the situation on your side. We're now formulating a rescue plan. If you don't mind, you could go back to the Lars Horn headquarters first. The reply from McGillis made Galileo excited. It's McGillis. Then let's go. Mr. K. Okay. Galileo, who was excitedly preparing to return to the Lars Horn headquarters on Earth, did not know that in the synchronous orbit of Earth, on the Mundak Chamber of Commerce's transport ship, McGillis was watching the scene of the Free Gouda breaking into the atmosphere again and again. Free Gouda, I didn't expect you to be able to do this. But in retrospect, with the ability to break through gravity alone, naturally, you can achieve the ability to break into the atmosphere alone. No matter what, I'm more and more looking forward to the Free Gouda and you, the pilot, Mecha. Chapter 714. Shirmiao Donghujia. When the former Abra representative was taking refuge in the Oceania Alliance, he was also paying attention to the whereabouts of the Iron Flower Regiment in Gidelia. This was not based on any purpose, but based on the idea of waiting for a glimmer of hope in a desperate situation. He silently watched their actions. Just as he thought, the moment the ship, the youth group known as the Iron Flower Regiment, led Gidelia to the Earth Circle and arrived at the Dort Colonial Satellite Group, the direction of the entire Earth Circle began to change. That's not just any partner. Or maybe the goddess of luck? Shirmiao, who watched the entire process of the Dort Colonial Satellite Group incident, once exclaimed. However, when the Iron Flower Regiment landed on the island he was on, he regretted what he had done in the past. Because, with the landing of the Iron Flower Regiment, a huge problem also fell here. Kalta Yethu, this young lady from the Yethu family, one of the seven-star families above Lars Horn, was captured by the Iron Flower Regiment. No, it should be said that the man hidden behind the Iron Flower Regiment had captured her. Moreover, the key point that made Shirmiao feel that things were beyond his expectations was that the moment Kalta Yethu, the young lady of the seven-star family, arrived, he learned about the existence of the man hidden behind the Iron Flower Regiment. Mecha, a mysterious man with an ancient Eastern name. A mysterious man who had been missing since the Iron Flower Regiment landed. Even when Olga and Gidelia, the head of the Iron Flower Regiment, came together, they still couldn't find him. The only thing Sure Meow could see was the steel giant standing quietly behind the coconut forest, facing the blue sea through the open screen door in his room, looking at the coconut forest. Sorry, when people get old, it's inevitable that they will be distracted. Miss Gudelia, Olga, and everyone else, please understand this old man. When Sure Meow withdrew his gaze from the free Gouda in the distance, he looked at the people sitting across from him again. He saw a face calmly waiting for his response. This was not the calm face that ordinary young people could have. Furthermore, before this, when they had just met, Sure Meow had displayed an amiable and friendly attitude. However, both Gudelia and the young Commander Olga exposed Sure Meow's hidden thoughts with a few words. This was an unbelievable result, but it also made Sure Meow feel that it was only natural. Gudelia, Olga, the little fatty Biscat, and the female accountant Mary Beatty were not the only ones sitting in front of him. Behind them stood a mysterious man who refused to show himself, and had just made Lars Horn suffer a great loss. Is this his guidance? Sure Meow stroked his beard and lowered his gaze slightly. This was his habit when he was thinking. As the former representative of Abro and the person that Gudelia wanted to cooperate with, he wasn't worried that his thoughts would be interrupted by Gudelia and Olga. On the contrary, he wanted to use this opportunity to test the patience of this group of young people in front of him. One had to know that even if someone was guiding him from behind, if his own patience was not up to par, he would still be unable to accomplish anything. Time passed by little. Olga and Gudelia were very good at keeping their cool. Even though the actions of the little fatty behind them were a little awkward, it was still understandable. After all, not everyone could endure the fatigue caused by kneeling. What you said before, I admit that there is such a thing. Personally, I really want to reach an agreement with Miss Gudelia. But before this wish is fulfilled, there are still some obstacles in front of me. We are very clear on this point. Therefore, we will do our best to help Mr. Sure Meow return to the position where he can reach an agreement with Gudelia. This is also the reason why we came from Mars and landed on Earth under the siege of Lars Horn. Sure Meow's words didn't surprise Olga. Even after Sure Meow slowly said those words, Olga didn't hesitate to speak out his own thoughts. Of course, these thoughts were also the conclusions that Olga made based on the actual situation under Ray Minkai's instructions. Is that so? You have indeed surprised me. Ha ha. The old man looked at the determined Olga, then looked at the determined Gudelia, then laughed. Originally, he thought the young people in front of him would hesitate, but he did not expect the mysterious man standing behind them to be prepared in advance. Not only did these young people expose him, the former representative in name, but he was actually just an old man who had fled to another country to seek refuge. But these young people also did not hesitate to help him return to the position of Abro's representative. Very good. You're all very good. Miss Gudelia, it is very good that you can go to Earth in person. So, Olga Regiment, when will you be able to depart? Olga pondered for a moment, but did not make a decision for a while. To be honest, when Ray Minkai told them to meet Sure Meow, he did not include this question. What's more, Olga, who came to Earth for the first time, did not know how far away the island they were on was from Abro. Although from space, the distance was only an arm's length. I need a map and a clear destination. That way, I can make the corresponding plans. Olga's reliable performance made Sure Meow laugh. That is of course. Then, our agreement can be considered as reached. The next thing, I will leave it to the Ironflower Corporation. Due to someone's guidance, the Taiwa Regiment and Sure Meow's first meeting didn't have the same oppressive atmosphere as before. Instead, there was an atmosphere of both sides showing their cards, taking a step back and reaching a final agreement based on their own interests. But on the other side of the ocean, in the headquarters built by Lars Horn in the depths of the ocean. But the atmosphere was not as good as the first meeting between Sure Meow and the Ironflower Corporation. When the patriarchs of the Big Dipper families stepped into the conference room, which represented the highest authority in Gallahorn, the atmosphere enveloped everyone present. After a long silence, no one was willing to speak. Some only slightly opened their eyes and looked at the empty seat under the golden squirrel flag of the Yethu family, one of the 7-star families. There was no other topic for today's meeting. It was all for this empty seat. At the same time, it was also for them. The leaders of the 7-star families, as well as the people who controlled Lars Horn, were still sitting here. Ahem, is everyone here? Duke Baguranzen, the head of the 7-star Baguranzen family, and also the oldest of the family heads, slowly opened his mouth to speak. As the oldest and most respected leader of Lars Horn, Duke Baguranzen was indeed qualified to speak at this time. In this regard, the people present also stopped looking at the empty seat, restrained their expressions, and waited for Duke Baguranzen to continue. Under the golden falcon flag that represented the Baguranzen family, a slender and pale beard slowly trembled as the oldest man stood up. Today, I gathered everyone here not for other things. It is for her, the little girl from the Yethu family. Originally, we pitted the decline of the Yethu family. In order to not let the only bloodline of the Yethu family wander outside and suffer danger, we placed Kalta Yethu in the position of the commander of the Earth's outer orbit command fleet. After all, Duke Baguranzen was old. After saying so much in one breath, he couldn't help but gasp for a few breaths before he could continue. But I didn't expect. The old and hoarse voice tried hard to describe the hatred in Duke Baguranzen's heart. But I didn't expect that Kalta Yethu would be captured in front of Lars Horn. At this point, the oldest man of Lars Horn couldn't help but choke. In the blink of an eye, only the choking voice of the oldest man could be heard in the entire conference room. Ahem, Duke Baguranzen, please don't be too sad. The one who captured Kalta Yethu. Duke Baguranzen coughed slightly and tried to smooth things over, but he didn't seem to remember the name of the Iron Flower Regiment that captured Kalta Yethu. It's the Iron Flower Regiment. It's a civilian security company from Mars. The man sitting next to Duke Baguranzen, who is also the patriarch of the Farid family from Megillus, Isnario Farid, spoke slowly and helped Duke Baguranzen, who had just been engaged to the Farid family. Yes, it's the Iron Flower Regiment. With Isnario's help, Duke Baguranzen nodded repeatedly, but then his brows slowly furrowed. But just a civilian security company was able to capture Kalta Yethu from the encirclement of our Earth's outer orbit command fleet? Everyone, do you think it's possible? Even Divaz, who has a great reputation in the outer circle, wouldn't dare to provoke us and Lars Horn so arrogantly, right? Duke Baguranzen's question not only stumped him, but also the patriarchs of the other families. In the silence, the choking voice of Duke Baguranzen gradually became softer. When the choking voice of the oldest man could no longer be heard, Isnario Farid slowly opened his mouth. It just so happens that someone can answer this question for everyone. Duke Baguranzen, your son, Gario Baguranzen, was once involved in this. Also, the reason why Kalta Yethu was captured on the spot, Megillus Farid of the Farid family has also been in contact with it. Although this was only an explanation, everyone present could understand the intention behind it. Then let them in. Speaking of which, I haven't seen them in a long time. You have to know that our 7-star family hasn't had such an outstanding descendant for a long time. The person who made the decision was still the oldest, Duke Baguranzen. As long as he spoke, everyone silently nodded to indicate that they had no objections. As the door leading to the conference room opened, 2 handsome young men with tall and straight figures stepped into the place that represented the highest authority in Gallahorn. Special Agent Major Megillus Farid greets the Grand Dukes. Special Agent Major Gario Baguranzen greets the Grand Dukes. Get up. There are no outsiders here. Just treat it as a casual chat. Megillus Farid, Gario Baguranzen, stand up. Yes. Megillus and Gario secretly exchanged glances before standing up together and looking at the patriarchs of the 7-star families. Megillus, tell us what you know. When Isnario Farid looked at Megillus' handsome face, there was a slight fluctuation in his eyes, but he concealed it very well. In the eyes of others, Isnario was just a strict superior. Yes, in fact, this isn't the first time the culprit who captured Kalta Yethu has appeared. When we were ordered to patrol the Mars branch, we encountered the mysterious mechanical body. McGillis' opening statement immediately attracted the attention of the patriarchs. McGillis farted. You mean that the body has already appeared on Mars? That Iron Flower Regiment? Duke Baguranzan glanced at Duke Baguranzan and asked. Yes. According to our observation files, the first sighting was near the city of Crissa on Mars. But the original owner shouldn't be the Iron Flower Regiment. Shouldn't be? Have you investigated? McGillis asked Isnarius. Yes. After the Iron Flower Regiment escaped from Mars, I sent people to investigate. The result of the investigation was that when the head of the Mars branch, Connor Kant, abused his power and sent an armored MS to capture Gedelia Lana Bernstein, the mysterious body suddenly intervened in the battle and became the reason why the Iron Flower Regiment escaped from Mars. In fact, this was not the case. For some reason, McGillis didn't tell the entire truth. What he said was only the truth that had been processed by him. McGillis wasn't afraid of being exposed by Gario on the spot, nor was he afraid that his Nario would see through anything. Therefore, when he submitted the report on the Mars branch incident, McGillis had already begun to make some adjustments to Gauda's sighting report. Mars branch? Could it be that the Mars branch took the initiative to provoke the mysterious body? Duke Baguranzan's eyes widened slightly, and he also looked at his son, Gario Baguranzan. No. According to our investigation, the appearance of the mysterious body seems to be just a coincidence. Galio shook his head and gave an answer that no one could accept. The family leaders exchanged glances, but they didn't make any decision. Cough. McGillis, Galio, after all that talk, do you have any information on that mysterious body? When Duke Bagulan opened his mouth once again, McGillis exclaimed inwardly. However, his expression still didn't change. Yes, Dukes. These are the images we took when we fought on Mars, the Colonial Satellite Group, and the Earth's Outer Orbit Command Fleet. The holographic projection fell like a waterfall. When the image was completed and presented in front of everyone, the family leaders of the seven-star families were immediately shocked by the pair of gorgeous light wings and the pair of invincible blades. A dual sword MS, it's like... Chapter 715. McGillis and Galio's time was over. The rest would be left to Lars Horn's highest decision-making level, which was the current 6 patriarchs of the seven-star families. McGillis and Galio didn't have any objections to this. Galio, are you still troubled? McGillis walked out of the conference room and came to a balcony not far away from the conference room. He turned around and looked at his friend. No, I'm not troubled. I'm just thinking about that group of universe. Halfway through his words, Galio paused. His face showed obvious unwillingness, but he had to admit that the Iron Flower Regiment, which had always regarded as a space rat, did indeed have the power to threaten Lars Horn. That group, I'm thinking about what they will do to threaten us. McGillis' expression showed that he was unwilling, but there was a trace of joy in his heart. Threaten us? Galio, maybe you've been mistaken about the Iron Flower Regiment's purpose from the beginning. From a beginning to the end, the Iron Flower Regiment was only following the contract with Gedelia Lana Bernstein and escorting her to Earth. McGillis remembered the first time he saw the Free Gauda appear. Fundamentally speaking, the Iron Flower Regiment, have never intended to be enemies with us and Lars Horn. McGillis' words didn't satisfy Galio. On the contrary, Galio's face seemed to show unwillingness. This was probably inevitable. Ever since the end of the Sacrificial War, Lars Horn, who had ruled the human world with force for hundreds of years, had unknowingly developed a sense of arrogance and didn't put any forces in the world in his eyes. This was probably the reason why the commander of the Earth's Outer Orbit Command Fleet was captured. Galio, don't show this face. In the end, the person who threw Lars Horn's face to the ground and stepped on it with all his might is holding the heir of the seven-star family. You family, in that group of mercenaries. Although McGillis' words didn't have much meaning, Galio's face suddenly turned incomparably pale as he had heard of the dark side of the conflict between mercenaries. Mackie, are you trying to scare me? Perhaps Matt Gillis was trying to scare Gallo, but in fact, Carter's treatment didn't seem to be any better. On the island where the Taiwan regiment landed, in a room in an airport, a young girl who had been forced to change into a maid uniform after changing out of Lars Horn's pilot uniform was awkwardly walking out of the room. Yes, it suits you. Calta issue. The culprit behind the girl's current appearance was sizing her up with interest. She had removed her strange makeup and revealed her bare face. In addition, she was wearing a surprisingly fitting maid's uniform. You actually let me suffer such humiliation. Do you want to become enemies with us and Lars Horn? Calta gritted his teeth and pointed at the culprit, almost cursing out loud. If it wasn't for the reservedness of being the only heir of you family that still maintained Calta's last trace of rationality. Become enemies? Miss Issue. Now, our situation seems to have become enemies with Lars Horn. Ray Minkai glanced at the finger that was almost pointing at his nose, smiled slightly, and said indifferently, "You." Calta's aggressive words were choked back by Ray Minkai's words on the spot, almost making her unable to say any words of retaliation. Yes. Now, as one of the 7-star families, the only heir of you family, the commander of the Earth's Outer Orbit Command Fleet, I have been captured. In this case, is there any room for reconciliation with Lars Horn? Calta's head that was filled with anger gradually cooled down. No. Even if I am released, I am afraid that my grandfather and uncles sitting under Lars Horn's 7 flags will not give up. Because this is not a matter of the Yu family, but it involves the face of Lars Horn and the 7-star families. Looking at Calta, who was lost in thought, Ray Minkai smiled lightly, then raised his right hand slightly, and the white lion Zero, standing in the shadow, disappeared. Now, there was no need for the white lion Zero to threaten Calta Yu with its fierce fangs. If you really want to become enemies with Lars Horn, then why do you want to stay? A dead Calta, you can make Lars Horn fall into chaos. What made Ray Minkai surprised was that Calta Yu would ask this question after a short period of contemplation. Oh, I didn't expect that Calta Yu, who is known as a rigid person, would pay attention to this kind of thing. When Ray Minkai's surprised face was reflected in Calta's eyes, Calta only frowned slightly. Inflexible? Is this the evaluation of the Control Bureau? Speaking of which, the guys in the Control Bureau never put me and my fleet in their eyes. This is normal. After a pause, Calta raised her eyes and looked at Ray Minkai. So, Mr. Robber, what are you going to do next? Do you want to use Calta Yu to threaten Lars Horn to compromise? Or do you want to use me to achieve something? Calta's questions came one after another, without the slightest consciousness of being a hostage, as if she was a studious student. No, you don't need to know these things. Before we depart, you only need to be responsible for the clothes you are wearing right now. Ray Minkai had no intention of answering Calta's question. He raised his hand and patted it, then said to the maid, Fumitin, who walked out from the shadows with a wooden expression. Fumitin, I'll leave her to you. Night. Barterhouse. Amelia and Lilina were sitting in the middle of the park. Amelia raised her head and puffed up her cheeks as she looked at the brightly lit room. Lilina, on the other hand, was sitting there quietly. She turned her head slightly and listened attentively to the sounds coming from the room. Sister Nunnally, aren't you angry? After a while, Amelia, who felt bored, turned her head and looked at the girl who had been quietly listening to the sounds coming from the room. Angry, the delicate face with tightly shut eyes turned around and shook her head slightly at Amelia. Not at all. Amelia, I'm not angry. Why? It's rare for McGillis and your brother to come back, but you immediately stay in the room and don't come out. What are you arguing about with my good-for-nothing brother? Amelia didn't understand what McGillis, Galio, and Lou Lucio were busy with. She simply thought that they didn't say anything when they came back. They were pointing at the map that Amelia couldn't understand and loudly arguing about something. Then there must be an important reason, right? Amelia, whenever my brother is worried about something, he will lock himself up and think about it alone. It's not because he hates me, but because he doesn't want those annoying things to annoy me and make me unhappy. So, I believe that Mr. McGillis and Mr. Galio are thinking the same thing. Really? Nunnally's words made Amelia's large eyes light up, and she asked with surprise. Yes, I believe so. Nunnally smiled faintly. In the room, the three people who were arguing endlessly around the map that depicted Abro's vital points and transportation hubs finally entered the intermission. Galio, who was racking his brain to figure out what the Ironflower Regiment would do next, subconsciously pulled his collar open to make himself feel better. Then, he turned around and sat on the sofa. He picked up the glass and took a sip of cold drink without any grace. McGillis, after calculating for so long, what do you think those guys will do? According to what you said before, the Ironflower Regiment seems to have met up with the former representative of Abro, who was kicked out of his country. McGillis glanced at his good friend who had already tossed aside his pride of being from a prestigious family and nodded. Yes, according to the information I received and the current situation in Abro, the person who can take the position of Abro's representative is Henry Fleur. And according to the rumors, she seems to have formed a relationship with one of our big shots, including Lars Horn. Oomph. So, that's why the former representative was kicked out of office by the sudden scandal of bribery and fled abroad? Galio immediately understood what McGillis was trying to say. Indeed, McGillis confirmed Galio's speculation. As the heir of a seven-star family, they naturally knew a lot of things that the public didn't know and wouldn't spread. And what happened to the former representative of Abro was probably not the first time in the recent history of Lars Horn. So, next, the purpose of the Ironflower Regiment is to send the former representative back to Abro, and then let her successfully appear before the election? This is indeed a way to let the girl achieve her so-called dream. Under McGillis' guidance, Galio quickly understood the entire chain of relationships. That's about it. McGillis nodded and looked at Lou Lucio, who was standing silently next to the map. Mr. K, it seems that you have some confidence. Hearing McGillis' words, Lou Lucio raised his head and looked at McGillis and Galio with a confident smile. Maybe not, but at least I have some ideas. Oh, let's hear it. Hearing that Lou Lucio seemed to have a breakthrough, Galio was immediately interested. Lou Lucio didn't refuse and pointed at the island marked as the Ironflower Regiment's location. Right now, the Ironflower Regiment is located here. According to our speculations, this is where they are heading to. Lou Lucio's finger drew a straight line between the island and the ocean. This ocean is undoubtedly a natural barrier for the Ironflower Regiment to cross. And in this natural barrier, Lars Horn's fleet is already cruising around the island. Therefore, the Ironflower Regiment can only go north if they want to break through the natural barrier and Lars Horn's obstruction. Go north. Galio and McGillis looked at each other. This conclusion was not unexpected, because just now, the two of them already agreed that the Ironflower Regiment might go north. But Galio didn't interrupt Lou Lucio. Of course, we already agreed that the Ironflower Regiment would go north. However, on the basis of going north, I boldly made another conjecture. Lou Lucio's finger drew a straight line between the island and the continent again. That mysterious body might directly cross the ocean and reach Abro's capital. What? Galio looked at Lou Lucio in disbelief. Based on Galio's understanding of the MS, there was no MS in the world that could fly such a long distance. No, the Grez used by Lars Horn couldn't fly at all. It could only rely on the propulsion engine to jump long distances. That wasn't flying at all. Not to mention that they had to start from the island on the other side of the ocean and fly across the entire ocean to reach another continent. This was simply a fantasy story. No, if it's that body, it might be able to do it. McGillis thought of the information that was hidden from him. Near the Ironflower Regiment's headquarters on Mars, the land that was scorched by some kind of terrifying heat, as well as the first time Gauda appeared in front of him. That graceful posture showed that Gauda definitely had the ability to cross the ocean. How can it be? If that's the case, Galio's eyebrows furrowed deeply. Lou Lucio and McGillis both believed that Gauda had the ability to cross the ocean, so Galio had to take this speculation seriously. If that's the case, that mysterious body might take Calta and go to Abro together. Why would it be Calta Ishio? As soon as Galio's speculation came out, Lucio casually refuted it. Galio wasn't annoyed. Instead, he smiled confidently. That former representative isn't us young pilots. If he dares to sit on that mysterious body, then this incident can be declared over. Galio's words implied that the former representative of Abro, Shirmiao Donggu's old body, couldn't withstand the overload caused by Gao Da's acceleration. McGillis also speculated on this point. If that's the case, it's very likely that the mysterious Mecha will bring Carta to Abro first, and then use Carta Yethu to put pressure on Abro's many counselors to achieve the opportunity to let Shirmiao Higuchi return to Abro. I'm afraid that's the case. No, maybe it's not that simple. Sir McGillis, Sir Galio. Lucio once again refuted McGillis and Galio's speculation. That body will definitely cross the ocean and go to Abro. The main force of the Ironflower Regiment will also land in the north, then follow the railway all the way south to Abro's capital. But Shirmiao Donggu won't be here. Chapter 716. There were no clouds for thousands of miles, and the blue waves were boundless. On the vast and boundless sea, a Pacific fleet belonging to the Earth's Outer Orbit Command Fleet was cruising along a set route. This was an order directly issued by Lars Horn headquarters. At the same time, it was also a good opportunity for the Earth Outer Orbit Command Fleet to wipe away their shame. In the capture of Commander Calta Yethu, as the commander, Calta Yethu naturally had his own responsibilities. But more importantly, it was the responsibility of the members of the Earth Outer Orbit Command Fleet. As a subordinate, not only did he not advise Calta Yethu not to attack rashly when he did not know the details of the enemy, but he also blindly followed Calta to rush out and cause trouble. As a result, he ended up in this humiliating situation today. This made the Earth Outer Orbit Command Fleet unable to raise its head in front of other fleets overnight. It was even more transparent than before in front of the Command Bureau. In this regard, as the commander of this intercepting fleet, Captain Sishienga had more right to speak. Because, in public, the capture of Calta Yethu made his career bleak. In private, he had a younger brother named Elis. It was the pilot who had his cockpit pierced by the Gundam sword on Mars. Captain Lars Horn, who took over this intercepting mission from the headquarters, must have thought that this was a mission that must be completed, and it must also be a mission that must be completed. Beep beep. When a hurried warning sounded, the soldier in charge of radar detection reported loudly on the spot. Reporting, Captain, an unknown target is approaching the air defense area of my fleet at high speed. The target height is 3,000. It's right in front of my fleet. What? Right in front? Height 3,000. Sishienga was taken aback. Then he picked up the telescope hanging around his neck and searched the sky in front of the fleet. Sure enough, Sitiana effortlessly found the target of their mission. No, rather than Sishienga looking for it, it was better to say that after their target was discovered by the Pacific Fleet's radar, it quietly floated in the sky, not avoiding or concealing its existence. Twin swords' wings. Through the telescope, Sishienga saw the twin swords mentioned in the report and the pair of huge wings. However, the light wings mentioned in the report did not appear. This made Sitiana somewhat puzzled. However, this wouldn't affect the Pacific Fleet's next move. Target distance? After putting down the binoculars, Sitianga's eyes almost burst into flames. We are now within the maximum firing range of my fleet. However, the target speed seems to be decreasing. Towards the end of his sentence, the radar officer was also somewhat puzzled. When facing Lars Horn and the Pacific Fleet, the radar personnel would either turn around and run or speak humbly, afraid of angering the people of the Pacific Fleet. Now, it was the first time they had seen someone swaggering in and slowly slowing down, walking into the air defense network of the Pacific Fleet as if no one was around. Sitiana did not care about this at all. All fleet, release Team MS immediately. Then, the battle against MS began. Target, beam wing aircraft. At an altitude of 3,000 meters, Gouda looked down at the Pacific Fleet with two swords in his hands. Every time Gretz took off from the mothership, it would inevitably be locked onto by Gouda's radar. Unfortunately, the airframes and battleships in this world were coated with a layer of nanomaterial coating that prevented light beams. Although in a fierce battle, these nanomaterial coatings might peel off under the high-temperature impact caused by live ammunition. The process was somewhat taxing. For Ray Minkai, it would be better to control Gouda and cut down 8 streets with a pair of high-frequency vibration swords. Flames appeared. The moment the last Gretz rushed out of the mothership, the Pacific Fleet above the sea fired the first anti-air missile and the first anti-air cannon on the spot. In an instant, the sky where Freedom Gouda was suddenly enveloped by a wave of smoke caused by the rapidly approaching missiles. Hum! In the seemingly powerful and thrilling missile attack, Freedom Gouda moved left and right while constantly waving the high-frequency vibration swords in his hands to destroy the missiles that rushed in front of him one by one. Boom! Boom! Wherever the swords passed, there was a frenzy of explosions set off by the destroyed missiles. And under this frenzy, the sound waves, fireballs, and even the shock waves were quite shocking. Standing on the deck of the mothership, the Gretz pilots who were wandering around the surrounding sea area, on alert for any signs of Freedom Gouda's escape, were all stunned. If this scene of a fleet exhausting all of its firepower had happened to him, he would have died countless times already. Looking at the fireballs that kept exploding and tearing the sky apart, as well as the anti-aircraft artillery shells that went into the fireballs and flew toward their targets, the pilots of Glazer's army had an illusion that they were unnecessary. Oof. Is this all you've got? The fireballs that burst out with dazzling brilliance occupied Si Tianga's vision. The rumbling explosion that shook the sky even shook the porthole in front of Si Tianga slightly. However, Si Tianga, who thought that he had killed the target, received a piece of news. Reporting, Captain. The first wave of attack of my fleet has been completed, but the target is still alive. What? In Si Tianga's exclamation of disbelief, a gorgeous light suddenly broke through the continuous explosion of fireballs, soared into the sky, and disappeared into the higher sky in the blink of an eye. Quick, go find a light-wing aircraft. Don't let it escape. At that moment, Si Tianga finally saw the pair of light wings mentioned in the report. Although it was only for a moment, Si Tianga still saw the scenery described in the fairy tale. It, riding the wind, rose, it spread its light wings as the gorgeous and illusory light wings spread out. The blade that judged the world slashed down from the sky, bringing all the people who had committed crimes into the abyss of eternal damnation. So fast. Save. The air was shaken by the ear-piercing screech, and the light wing that left a trail of brilliance in the sky had already descended above a mothership on the right side of the Pacific Fleet. Gretz, who was standing on the deck of the mothership, had just regained his senses when he saw the cold light that was slashing towards him. Boom! The cold light swept past, and the mothership, including Gretz, was astonishingly cut into 2 halves. The former was cut into 2 halves, while the latter was cut into 2 halves by the vibration blade in Gouda's hand. Starting from the front of the bridge was flattened. Ear-piercing rumbling sounds, the waves set off by the violent explosion, crazily shook the Pacific Fleet's battleship that was closest to the unfortunate mothership. Quick! What are you still standing there for? Quickly attack the target. Don't let it get close to our battleship. The short moment of astonishment did not make Si Tianga fall into a daze. Instead, it made his back shiver, and his forehead was covered in cold sweat. Too scary. Originally, the so-called light wings were just a farce created by a group of people who floated in the universe all day to shirk their responsibilities. But from the moment he saw the light wings, Si Tianga suddenly felt somewhat lacking in confidence. Boom! Cannon fire once again roared above the Pacific Fleet, but it could no longer be like before, involving Gouda in the violent explosion. No matter how the radar of the Pacific Fleet's battleship locked on and guided, Gouda, who spread out the light wings, could always change direction the moment before it was locked on, leaving the radar far behind. But what could the radar personnel who controlled the radar do? Could they report to CTNA? As long as they saw CTNA no longer had the confident and arrogant attitude before the battle, and only had his hands tightly holding the railing, his eyes chasing the figure shuttling back and forth in the Pacific Fleet's cannon fire, the radar personnel could not help but shut their mouths. Where's Gretz? Where did Gretz go? Quick, let Gretz intercept that light-wing aircraft. Seeing that the Pacific Fleet's cannon fire was no longer of any use, CTNA could only use the last trump card, but he did not know if it would be useful. Therefore, Gretz, who was standing on the deck of the mothership, or wandering in the nearby waters, could not wait for the opportunity to intercept Gauda and launch an attack on the spot. Is Gretz starting to attack? But can you catch up to Gauda's speed? In the interception net of the fleet's cannon fire, Ray Minkai only smiled faintly when Gretz's attack appeared. He did not care at all that Gretz's troops were among the enemies intercepting Gauda. With a flap of the light wings, Gauda left after images in the air. Taking advantage of the moment when the Pacific Fleet's radar was confused by the after images, Gauda had already rushed to the front of Gretz's team that was closest to it. Scatter, as soon as he saw Gauda appear, the captain of Gretz's team, who was about to give battle orders, was swept by the vibration sword in Gauda's hand and fell into the deep sea below with his beloved aircraft. Boom! A water column dozens of meters high rose into the sky with Gretz's explosion, and it also blocked the cannon fire that followed. Gauda boom! Boom! The missile that was blocked by the water column lost its posture for a moment, and like a headless fly, it crashed into the sea and set off a new wave of water columns. Gauda waved the sword in his hand and buried this unlucky Gretz's team in the sea. Voila! Surrounded by the water columns, Gauda dragged the water vapor that was evaporated by the light wings and soared into the sky again. Gene Squad, it's silent. CIC's eyes were wide open. For the Pacific Fleet, Team Gene was the main pillar of the fleet. Such an elite combat power couldn't even last one round against Gauda's sword and was instantly cut down. Gene Squad, CTNA clenched his teeth, and the veins on his face almost popped out, making him look particularly ferocious. The bombardment of the Pacific Fleet continued. However, after taking care of Gene Squad, Gauda didn't hover in the sky, but chose to fly across the sea. In the attack, just now, Ray Minkai thought of a good idea. Since the water column could confuse the enemy's vision and hide Gauda's whereabouts, Ray Minkai didn't need to be polite anymore. Boom! Boom! Amidst the fierce and dense artillery fire, the Freedom Gundam no longer swung the blade in its hand to cut down the incoming missiles. Instead, it guided them to the surface of the sea, allowing them to crash into the sea and explode into water pillars that soared into the sky. This provided temporary cover for the Freedom Gundam to freely shuttle through the Pacific Fleet. As the water columns rose and fell, Gauda's figure appeared around the Pacific Fleet like a ghost. Every time he appeared, he would definitely be able to take down a Grey squad, or a Pacific Fleet battleship with a sword in his hand. In less than 10 minutes, the Pacific Fleet, which had once occupied this area of the sea and was insufferably arrogant in the eyes of ordinary people, was now filled with thick smoke. The surroundings were filled with steel wreckage that had been engulfed by flames, as well as the terrifying Mecha that sat on the life raft and watched in despair as it spread out its wings of light and swung its two swords, burying the Pacific Fleet one sword after another. Captain Gray's squad. Everyone is silent. CIC stood up with an emotionless face. In the process of the battle, perhaps CIC tried to help the Grey squad to fight for a chance of victory. But in the end, these efforts were all for naught under Gauda's sword. When the last Grey's squad pilot died under Gauda's sword with a terrified cry for help, CIC understood that perhaps this was his last time. CTNA didn't answer his subordinate, because the sword that almost destroyed the Pacific Fleet was right in front of him. Do you think this will be the end of us? Barbarians from Mars. A cold light bloomed. The moment the low roar of steel being instantly cut apart swept across CTNA. It was the moment the Pacific Fleet was destroyed. The crew members of the Pacific Fleet who were lucky enough to escape from the burning wreckage looked in despair and fear at the flagship that slowly sank under Gao Da's sword. At this moment, the crew members who were lucky enough to escape seemed to have died along with the flagship that sank into the abyss. Mission completed. Looking at the battleship that slowly sank into the deep sea below, Ray Minkai didn't chase after the crew members on the life raft. Instead, he raised his head and looked to the north. According to their plan, Gaudo was responsible for crossing the Pacific Fleet. The Ironflower Regiment was responsible for landing in the north and going south along the railway. As for Shermiao and Gedelia, Ray Minkai and the Ironflower Regiment were not responsible for them. The entire plan was modified by Ray Minkai based on the plan proposed by Olga. The key to the plan was the third team that would escort Shermiao and Gedelia to Abro. And this team was led by State Zero, the long-toothed lion. Chapter 717. The Pacific Fleet responsible for stopping Gao Da was completely annihilated. When this news was passed back to the headquarters of Gallahorn by the survivors of the Pacific Fleet, all the big shots sitting in those chairs were shocked by this incredible news. Apart from his Nerio Farid, who had temporarily left Lars Horn headquarters due to some matters, the other 5 patriarchs silently watched the real-time images transmitted back from the area where the Pacific Fleet sank. The raging flames burning the steel warships, the billowing smoke soaring into the sky, and the Jia Lars Horn soldiers struggling to escape from the sinking warships and desperately swimming towards the nearby life rafts, and so on. The gathered images brought an unimaginable shock to these bigwigs who had always stood at the top of Jia Lars Horn and even human society. The once insufferably arrogant Jia Lars Horn fleet was actually so easily wiped out by an unknown enemy. Total annihilation, a crushing defeat. At this moment, whether it was the oldest Duke Bagurin or the youngest Duke Kazan, they were unable to utter a single word, or sentence to describe their current feelings. After a long time, the oldest Duke Bagurin slowly exhaled. After looking around at the patriarchs, he slowly asked, "Everyone, may I know where Duke Farid is now?" Before Duke Farid left, he asked me to inform you all. He will be Kalta Yuthu's guardian and will personally supervise the rescue operation. Rydal Aryan, the patriarch of one of the 7-star families, answered this question. Duke Bagurin glanced at the usually forthright Rydal Aryan, who had a good reputation in Lars Horn, and slowly nodded. Since it's about the plan to rescue Kalta Yuthu, it's no wonder Duke Farid didn't attend this meeting. But after the meeting, we have to inform Duke Farid of the destruction of the Pacific Fleet. Well, I don't think we need to worry about this problem. After all, Special Agent Major McGillis Farid is still in the headquarters, making final preparations for the operation against the Ironflower Regiment. The one who replied to Duke Bagurin was still Rydal Aryan. Although this seemed a little inappropriate, Bagurazin didn't mind. As the new guardian of Duke Kazan, Master Aryan naturally had the right to answer the question. Moreover, the other families had no intention of answering Bagurazin's question. This wasn't done on purpose to give Bagurazin a hard time. They were still in shock from the destruction of the Pacific Fleet. McGillis Farid, is it? An outstanding young man. Bagurazin nodded slowly. Then he slowly picked up his cane and slammed it on the ground. Boom! The sound of the cane hitting the ground instantly attracted everyone's attention. How long has it been? How long has it been since we, Lars Horn, have encountered such a situation since we were born? Duke Aryan, in your memory, has Earth, which is like our backyard, ever been in a situation where our fleet was destroyed? Restal Aryan frowned, then slowly shook his head. No. What about Duke Falk? No. What about Duke Barter? The middle-aged man who was questioned by the oldest Bagurazin was stunned for a moment, then shook his head. No. As far as I can remember, Earth is like Gallahorn's backyard. Nothing as terrible as today has ever happened on Earth. That's true. Nothing like this has ever happened. Ever since I was born, Earth under Lars Horn's guardianship has never experienced anything as terrible as today. I believe that everyone here, including me, is just like the new Duke Kazan, encountering something like this for the first time. The old man took a deep breath, then continued. Then, in the hundreds of years since the establishment of Lars Horn, has there ever been anything like this? This question stumped all the patriarchs present. Everyone looked at each other, unable to answer the old man's question for a while, until Restal Aryan, who was stroking his beard, slowly said a short history. In the history of Lars Horn, there has indeed been a situation where Lars Horn's fleet was destroyed in a short period of time. However, that was a situation that would only appear in history that should have been obliterated long ago. A sharp glint gradually appeared in Restal Aryan's eyes. And that history is what we call the era of the sacrificial war of doom. What? What? Duke Aryan? Are you kidding me? That was something that happened hundreds of years ago. How is that possible? As the youngest Duke Kazan among the Seven Stars patriarchs, Iagu Kazan finally couldn't help but speak. How could something that happened hundreds of years ago happen again now? Duke Kazan, is that what you want to say? Restal Aryan raised his hand to interrupt Iagu Kazan's words, then continued. Although even I find it hard to believe, in fact, a situation that can destroy Lars Horn's fleet can only happen in the era of the sacrificial war of doom. Duke Aryan, are you saying that we and Lars Horn should raise the alarm to the highest level now that the Pacific Fleet is destroyed, and then let the world fall into the fear of the sacrificial war of doom, just because of an unknown body? Duke Falk refuted Restal Aryan's words, but Restal Aryan wasn't angry because of it. No, I didn't mean that. It's just that I used an inappropriate metaphor. Compared to the sacrificial war of doom that wiped out humanity, our enemy now is a human piloting an unknown body, but its performance is beyond the knowledge of us and Lars Horn. After pausing for a moment, a self-deprecating smile appeared on Restal Aryan's face. This is much better than when our ancestors faced the cold and ruthless machines that only knew how to kill humans. Outside the window, there was an endless ocean with a gentle breeze and a bright sun. McGillis narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at the sea outside. After he raised his hand to turn off the communication from the outside world, he exhaled slightly. What a surprise! Amidst the exclamation, the voice of his good friend Galio also came from outside the door. Special Agent McGillis, Major. Not good. Calm down. Galio, if you want to tell me the news of the destruction of the Pacific Fleet, then you can rest assured. I already know and notified Duke Farid, who is out on business. McGillis's calmness gradually calmed Galio down. Then he showed a bitter smile. I didn't expect Kalta's Outer Orbit Command fleet to be so miserable. Not only was the commander captured, but he even destroyed a Pacific fleet. McGillis looked at the bitter smile on Galio's face. Then he turned slightly and looked at the endless ocean again. Galio, maybe you won't be happy if I say this, but Kalta's current situation, I'm afraid she brought it upon herself. You, who participated in that battle, might know more than me. In that situation, what do you think Kalta should have done? Of course, use the fleet's firepower to lock down the airspace and cooperate with the MS Force's attack rhythm to encircle that machine. As soon as the words came out, Galio was stunned. At that time, Kalta's actions violated the command requirements taught in the textbook, and it might even be included in the textbook's many failure cases. Do you understand? Galio. Although McGillis' back was facing Galio, he knew Galio's face must be changing constantly. The bitterness on Galio's face gradually deepened. He understood everything McGillis said. He just found it hard to accept Kalta's self-inflicted wounds. Even so, we still have to rescue Kalta, don't we? This is not only for our childhood friend, but also for us, Lars Horn, and the reputation of the Seven Stars family. Galio's bitterness gradually receded, leaving behind a firm will to save his childhood friend. Yes, you're right, but we have to grasp a new power. Now, this Lars Horn has become rotten in the past hundreds of years, and he no longer has enough power to deal with a new enemy. McGillis turned around again, and when he faced Galileo, Galileo saw McGillis' eyes flickering with an unknown light, but there was a certain stubbornness in them. Maybe it's time to let this rotten Lars Horn return to his original place. Deep in the ocean, on the mirror-like surface of the ocean, a huge cruise ship was following the planned route all the way north, heading towards a city called Anchorage at the northern end of the ocean. As night fell, the calm ocean was shrouded by the scattered starlight, and it became even more quiet and mysterious. However, under this quiet and mysterious veil, the interior of the cruise ship was filled with jubilation. Amazing! Wow! Exclamations! Exclamations! Cheers could be heard one after another in the cabin. Listening carefully, it was as lively as a carnival. In fact, the situation in the cabin was not much different from a carnival. What the hell is going on? It seems to be noisy outside. Before disembarking, Shermeow, who was still moving with the Ironflower Regiment, raised her eyes slightly and looked in the direction of the sound. It seems to be because of the news from Sir Ray Minkai. Gidelia, who had just come from the dining hall, hesitated for a moment before revealing a smile. Sir Ray Minkai's battle was successful. Now, there is no enemy in this ocean that can threaten this cruise ship. Oh, Shermeow raised her eyebrows and seemed a little surprised. Sir Ray Minkai defeated Lars Horn's Pacific Fleet? No, it was destroyed. Minkai has already sunk Lars Horn's Pacific Fleet. The one who answered Shermeow was not Gidelia, but a girl with pink hair tied into a high ponytail and wearing a purple formal dress. Oh, may I know who you are? The unfamiliar girl made Shermeow's expression slightly solemn. In the Ironflower Regiment, he was the most unfamiliar. There were only two people he had never seen before. Even Kalte Yethu, who was captured by Ray Minkai, was also seen by Shermeow when Firmitten commanded her back and forth. Therefore, the remaining two people were probably the pink girl in front of him and Ray Minkai, who was always talked about by the Ironflower Regiment. I'm Lax Klein. Nice to meet you. Sir Shermeow. Donghu, please forgive me for not paying you a visit in time. The pink girl apologized to Shermeow with a kind smile and walked into the room. At the same time, as the pink girl walked into the room, the girl who followed behind her but was not immediately discovered by Shermeow made him slightly surprised. Kalte Yethu. However, Shermeow's expression was destined to be dominated by surprise. The heavy footsteps that followed brought a sense of uneasiness and even fear. It was as if it was born in the depths of human genes from the barbaric era. Once one came into contact with the terrifying memories from the barbaric era, the fear would awaken. Teacher, be careful. The young man behind Shermeow took a big step forward and blocked in front of Shermeow. His expression was tense as he looked at the snow-white lion that slowly stepped into the room from the door. In this room that was not considered spacious, if this ferocious beast that suddenly entered the room went crazy, the people in the room would definitely die. Don't worry, State Zero will not harm anyone. On the contrary, it will be the key to let Sir Shermeow and Gidelia go to Edmonton first. Lax opened her mouth to stop the young follower and explain the whole story. Gidelia, who had already seen State Zero before, was naturally calm. However, Shermeow was unexpectedly abnormally calm. He even laughed out loud. Ha ha ha, is this the Sir Lion that the Ironflower Regiment's half-grown brats are talking about? After raising his hand to let the follower back off, Shermeow stood up with his cane and walked to the front of the snow-white lion under Lax's gaze. Nice to meet you, Sir Lion. I am Shermeow Donghu Suk. Please advise me on the road ahead. Shermeow's goodwill did not receive a response from the snow-white lion. Instead, the snow-white lion only glanced at Shermeow indifferently before walking to a place not far behind Lax and lying down. Regarding this, Shermeow was not angry. Ha ha, looks like Sir Lion still has some temper. Fine. Miss Lax Klein, I hope you don't mind. Although I'm a little old, I still like to see new things. No, Sir Shermeow, you don't have to mind. Furthermore, you and Gidelia will be sitting in State Zero's cockpit and crossing the ocean to reach Edmonton first. Chapter 718. The bright full moon hung in the night sky, sprinkling its veil-like light onto the ocean, draping a dreamy veil over the tranquil surface of the sea. And in this veil, the starlight from the stars was as dazzling and beautiful as jewels. But this beautiful scene was not praised by the people of the Ironflower Regiment, because the eyes of the people of the Ironflower Regiment were already filled with astonishment. A snow-white steel behemoth was lying quietly on the deck of the cargo ship. The empty space on the deck, which was originally the size of a football field, suddenly became a little narrow after the snow-white steel behemoth appeared. So powerful, so big. The people of the Ironflower Regiment, who had just received the good news of Freedom Gauda's destruction of the Pacific Fleet, were once again surprised by the moment. The ferocious and huge snow-white mechanical lion lying on the deck of the cargo ship shocked the people of the Ironflower Regiment, who rushed over after hearing the news. This is State Lions Zero? Because of Lake's prior notice, Olga, who witnessed the whole process of State Lion Zero transforming from the lion form to the long-fanged lion form, was still unable to recover from the shocking scene. Olga, didn't you see me transforming back to my original form with your own eyes? What made Olga even more shocked was that mighty and powerful steel lion actually opened its mouth to speak. Wah! In an instant, the people of the Ironflower Regiment took a few steps back, leaving only Olga, who was stunned, and the 3 suns and moons, who were still wondering how the lion, who was perfectly fine just a moment ago, turned into this mighty steel lion. Lion? It seems to be very powerful. Looking at the shocked faces of the people of the Ironflower Regiment, Lakis smiled slightly. In fact, she had already expected this to happen. Not only the people of the Ironflower Regiment, even Sher Meow, who had always maintained a calm and unfathomable image in front of the people of the Ironflower Regiment, was the same. The moment the long-fanged lion appeared in front of him, the calmness that he had accumulated over the years was gone. What was left were the remnants of his worldview that had been shattered by the brand-new thing in front of him, the scene that had overturned his outlook on life that had been formed by the precipitation of his long life. This is not an opponent that we can fight against. A youth from the Ironflower Regiment. Sher Meow took a deep breath and looked at Lakis. May I ask if this is the power that allowed Gudelia and I to head to Edmonton first? In the end, Sher Meow couldn't find the right words to describe the current situation. In the end, he could only use the word strength to describe it. Power? Lakis shook her head slightly, then looked at the tusked lion, Style Zero. It's not a force. He was Kai's most important and trusted companion, as well as my friend. So, Sir Sher Meow and Gudelia, please rest assured and head to Edmonton under its protection. Oomph. It was just a long way to go. Do you have to be so nervous? A thunderous voice rang out, scaring the Ironflower Regiment's youths who wanted to sneak a closer look at the tusked lion Style Zero. In their panicked eyes, the tusked lion Style Zero that was lying on the deck slowly stood up, wantonly stretching its metallic body that was flashing with cold light. It really looked strong. 3 suns and moon looked at the tusked lion Style Zero that was stretching its body, and looked at the sharp teeth and golden claws that reflected the moonlight. There was a trace of respect in his eyes. Oomph. Kid, you want to fight? Your Barbados can't stand my torment. You should know that I was the one who stripped the mech that guy called Gusion clean. The change in 3 suns and moon's eyes was instantly captured by the tusked lion Style Zero. Gusion? Got a Gusion. When he heard the tusked lion Style Zero mention his own body, Akihiro couldn't help but speak. The Ironflower Regiment's youths all remembered that when Gauda Gusion fell into the Ironflower Regiment's hands, other than the skeleton, there was nothing else. They never thought that the tusked lion Style Zero would actually reveal the truth about how Gauda Gusion became like that. All right. State Zero. It's getting late. It's time to depart. At this moment, Lux clapped her hands, stopping the tusked lion Style Zero from showing off. That's true. According to Sir Raymond Kai's plan, it's almost time for us to depart. Gudelia, who finally recovered from the shock brought by the tusked lion Style Zero, quickly continued Lux's words. Before the plan started, Gudelia didn't know where Rei Minkai's confidence came from. In any case, Gudelia only took into account the strength of the Iron Flower Regiment and the Daiwa's division on Earth. Under these two forces, they might be able to carry out the plan of splitting their forces, but they would not be able to face the possibility of Gallahorn concentrating on one side and restraining the other. Now, she first received the good news of the Free Gao, the destroying Lars Horn's Pacific Fleet alone, then witnessed the entire process of the Lion Style Zero becoming a powerful and huge metal mechanical lion. Gudelia's heart couldn't help but have a strong sense of trust. That's right. Rei Minkai's plan will definitely succeed. Moreover, under Lux's guidance, she understood a lot of things. A lot of things that she couldn't learn or understand on Mars, or even on the Colonial Satellite Group. Miss Lux. Now, Gudelia Lana Bernstein will go first. Let's meet in Edmonton. Gudelia's face was unwavering. She took determined steps, and under everyone's gaze, she walked step by step to the foot of the Lion Style Zero and looked up at the huge metal lion in front of her. Master Style Zero, how are you going to take me and teacher Shermiao to Edmonton? The huge steel head slowly lowered, and Gudelia's figure was reflected in its cold, golden eyes. How else can I take you? Sit on it. If it weren't for Guy, you or the old man over there wouldn't be able to get into my cockpit. In the thunderous voice of Style Zero, the cockpit at the head of the Lion Style Zero opened, revealing the two-seater cockpit in front of Gudelia. MF, when she saw the cockpit, Gudelia was stunned. No matter how she imagined, she couldn't imagine that a metal lion that could speak human language, whose words and actions were extremely human-like, would have a cockpit for a human to sit in and control. No, I'm not MS. I'm Soft Mechanical Beast, and my name is Lion Style Zero. Style Zero denied Gudelia's name. Soft Mechanical Beast? However, the name that came out of Style Zero's mouth made sure Meow reveal a hint of seriousness. There was no other reason. It was the ability to speak human language and extremely human-like behavior. In Sure Meow's memory, the only thing that could be close to this level of human-like behavior was probably the many cruel angels that brought disaster to mankind hundreds of years ago. Your Excellency, Sure Meow, you don't have to worry. Style Zero isn't them. Moreover, it's friendly to mankind. Regardless of whether it was Lei Minkai's instructions or Lux's initiative to search for information regarding the disaster that happened hundreds of years ago after coming to this world, Lux could immediately sense Shizeo's apprehension. Moreover, among everyone present, only Sure Meow was able to associate State Zero's performance with the disaster that happened hundreds of years ago. For mankind, hundreds of years were enough to eliminate the huge crisis that once wiped out mankind and the lingering fear. Is that so? Sure Meow glanced at Lux, and then looked at Gudelia, who was trying to enter the cockpit with Lion Style Zero's guidance. She slowly exhaled. Then, this old man will accept Sir Rei Minkai's kindness. Picking up the cane, Sure Meow walked with old but steady steps, step by step, to the front of the Long Fong Lion Zero style. Sir Style Zero, in the following journey, please understand my old bones. Old man, don't worry. This journey will be the most unforgettable journey in your life. Just as Style Zero's voice fell, a faint light suddenly appeared from the void and condensed into a flight of stairs. It extended from the side of Style Zero's cockpit and stopped at the feet of Sure Meow and Gudelia. Okay, time's up. Come up. Perhaps it was due to the habit of shocking people one after another. Lion Style Zero's move did not shock Sure Meow and Gudelia much. Instead, after looking at each other, they stepped forward together, stepped on the faint light stairs that appeared from the void, and walked into Lion Style Zero's cockpit. Roar! A low roar was the signal for Lion Style Zero to depart after welcoming new guests. Lux, Kai will be back soon. Don't worry. Now I'm leaving. Under the moonlight, a pure white steel lion covered in a gauze made of scattered starlight jumped down from the deck of the cargo ship. Looking at the vigorous figure, Olga suddenly had an idea. Not good. There's seawater below. There's no place for her. Before she finished speaking, a faint light emerged from the sea and shocked everyone in the Ironflower Regiment once again. As the long-toothed Lion Zero Styles' footsteps fell, a shimmering barrier miraculously appeared under his feet, allowing him to step firmly on the ground. It served as a stepping stone for him to advance rapidly on the sea. There is no sign of him falling into the deep sea below. Lambda Drive System. I'm not sure what it is, but this is the reason why Lion Style Zero dared to cross the ocean and send Meow, Higo, and Gedelia to Edmonton first. Lux's voice pulled Olga's attention back. Olga, who came back to her senses, realized that Lux was looking at her with a serious gaze. Regiment Commander Olga. Now, you should understand what the Ironflower Regiment should do when Kai and Lars Horn's Pacific Fleet is destroyed and Lion Style Zero took Sir Meow and Gedelia away first. How should they deal with the possible actions that Lars Horn might take after landing? Lux's series of questions made Olga silent. Meow and Gedelia left first, which meant that the Ironflower Regiment had to act according to the original plan. They had to find an illusion that could confuse Lars Horn so that Lars Horn would focus most of his attention on the railway from Anchorage to Edmonton. Zhao Hong, can I hand it over to you? Olga pondered for a moment and called out Zhao Hong's name. Me? Zhao Hong froze for a moment and nodded subconsciously. Very good. Then, the candidate to disguise as teacher Meow is you. Without waiting for Zhao Hong to react, Olga made the decision. What? Disguise? Zhao Hong froze again. This was something that couldn't be helped. Meow, Higo's physique was much larger than ordinary people. In the Taiwa Regiment, the only person who had a similar build to Meow Higashi was Akihiro. Then, who's the candidate for Gedelia? The candidate for Meow was decided just like that. But if it was Gedelia, Olga was in a dilemma. In fact, in Olga's impression, the person who was similar to Gedelia was undoubtedly no. Or rather, Gedelia seemed to be subconsciously learning Lakis's words and actions. Therefore, Regiment Commander Olga, I have a better candidate here. Following Lux's gaze, Olga saw Kalta Ishu, who was forced to change into a maid's uniform. It was fine if she didn't look, but with one look, Olga felt that Kalta Ishu seemed to have the potential to disguise as Gedelia. It was just that there was a difference in age and height between the two. Regiment Commander Olga, the task of disguising Kalta Ishu as Miss, leave it to me. Just as Olga was in a dilemma, Fumitin, who had been staying in the shadows and silently watching Gedelia board the tusked Lion Zero, suddenly spoke up and volunteered himself. Fumitin. Olga also knew about the relationship between Gedelia and Fomitin. Originally, as a traitor, Fumitin wasn't suitable to stay in the Ironflower Regiment, but because Gedelia and Ray Minkai didn't want to pursue the matter, Olga turned a blind eye and treated the maid as heir. This is also a solution. Regiment Commander Olga, what do you think? Without waiting for Olga to make a decision, Lux had already agreed to Fumitin's request. Seeing this, Olga didn't object. Who are you? That lion is definitely not Lars Horn, or even a product of this world. Surprisingly, before Kalta was taken away by Fumitin, he suddenly displayed a tough attitude and attempted to force Lux to reveal her background. Facing this question, Lux only smiled faintly. We're just unfortunate people who happen to be here. Chapter 719. A train station that should have become a historical relic welcomed a group of special guests on the eve of the arrival of the cold wave. The Ironflower Regiment came from the endless ocean to this faintly chilly train station, but they felt a sense of familiarity. However, it was not because the Ironflower Regiment had been here before, but because the climate of the train station they set foot on was somewhat similar to the climate on Mars. It's so cold. Biscat stretched out his hands, exhaled, and observed the scenery around the train station. It was similarly cold, but it was denser and denser than Mars. He couldn't help but press down on his hat. After all, this isn't Mars. Behind Biscat, a black, bulletproof limousine was slowly being guided by the teenagers to the last carriage of the train that was parked at the side of the platform. This was a prop prepared for this battle. The moment the train left the train station, the existence of this black, extended version of the bulletproof car was intentionally or unintentionally leaked out. It was likely to be captured by the scouts and attracted the attention of Lars Horn. At this time, a group of teenagers armed with live ammunition walked out of the train station. They looked alert as they occupied various advantageous positions and controlled the entire area. Then, another group of teenagers led by Olga and three sons and moons quickly walked out of the train station building and onto the platform. They didn't even look back as they boarded the train on the platform. Although their movements were fast, among the teenagers wearing dark green coats, the extremely conspicuous black robe and red dress were extremely eye-catching. Even from a distance, Lars Horn, who observed the movement of the train station with telescopes, could still see clearly. Report. Target found. Now, they have boarded the train, ready to leave the train station. Behind the binoculars was the young soldier in Gallahorn's standard soldier uniform. In the next second, a question came from the communications signal received by the helmet during integration. Has the target's identity been confirmed? This question made the two Gallahorn scouts, who were in charge of monitoring the train station, glance at each other. He didn't seem to understand why he would ask such a question. According to the information obtained by Lars Horn scouts, who were now scattered around the train station, there was a large number of them. The number one character, Gedelia Lana Bernstein, was based on the image of the red dress that appeared in the Colonial Satellite Cluster incident. As for the second in command, Shirmiao Higuchi, he liked to wear black robes and hold a cane. Therefore, under these two prerequisites, Lars Horn and the scouts at the front line did not have to spend much effort to determine their target. After all, the entire station was under the control of Divac security personnel. If he got too close, he might alert the enemy. With all kinds of thoughts flashing through his mind, the scout named Lars Horn was silent for a moment before pressing the communication button. Yes, identity confirmed. But we can't rule out the possibility that the other side might be using a disguise. Understood. After the train leaves, all the scouts can immediately withdraw. We will use the satellite surveillance network to track the target. Roger. Inside a carriage in the middle of the train, the burly Shirmiao was surrounded by people. After he walked into the specially arranged carriage, he suddenly collapsed and almost collapsed on the sofa. So uncomfortable. How long will this take? Shirmiao threw the cane to the side and helplessly patted the gray beard on his chin. Just now, you did a good job. Zhao Hong, please endure for a while more. Olga, who followed behind, saw Shirmiao complaining. She immediately shook her head and showed a helpless smile. I know. Shima Miao was Akihiro. When he heard Olga's words, he immediately stopped complaining and returned to his expressionless face. Before the mission is completed, I will continue to endure. Admiral. I'm counting on you. Olga didn't expect Zhao Hong, who is usually expressionless, to have such a high acting talent. Zhao Hong, who was surrounded by people just now, did look like he was doing it. On the other side, Fumitin was busying himself around the woman sitting in front of the makeup mirror. The long blonde hair was gently removed by Fumitin, revealing the original long silver hair. With the help of Fumitin's skillful hands and tools, Gedelia Lana Bernstein's face, which had turned her face white and smooth, revealed the face of Kalta Yu. Looking at the gradually changing face in the mirror, Kalta was silent. He was as silent as a delicate porcelain doll, allowing Fumitin to do as he pleased. Only after Fumitin had confirmed that Karta was done removing his makeup did Karta get some time to move around. Because this time, the makeup removal wasn't to free Kalta. Instead, it was another experiment to get closer to Gedelia Lana Bernstein's image. Why are you doing this? Kalta glanced at Fumitin, who was cleaning up the makeup tools, and turned to look at Lux, who was sitting in a chair behind him. This is to confuse Lars Horn's actions. Thank you for your hard work. Kalta Ishu. Obviously, Lux didn't answer the question. Kalta could see that Lux knew the question he wanted to ask, but she kept avoiding it. No, it should be said that she didn't care about Kalta's question at all. If you're just lost, We and Lars Horn should be able to help you. Kalta bit his lips and fought for the last bit of his freedom. Lars Horn? Lux shook her head and didn't want to continue on this topic. Kalta Ishu, you're just as Kia said, naive and old-fashioned. This world isn't as simple as you think it is. Let's end today's conversation here. From now on, you're no longer Kalta Ishu, but Gudelia Lana Bernstein. Lux Klein, are we, Gallahorn, so unbearable? You'd rather support the Iron Flower Regiment, which is like a space rat, than be friends with Lars Horn, who has supported world peace for 300 years. Kalta Ishu's question was destined to not receive an answer from Lux, because, in the next moment, Fomitin, who had already prepared the tools, had already begun the disguise of Kalta Ishu as Gudelia Lana Bernstein. On the ground, covered in pure white snow, a huge train pulled by 2 locomotives was slowly moving along the railway that started from Anchorage and extended all the way to Edmonton. As the huge train moved forward, the snow on both sides of the tracks was swept up by the airflow, covering the train that was speeding towards Edmonton with a hazy white sheen. Looking down from a high mountain in the distance, the train covered in a layer of hazy white, snow looked like a python crawling on the snowy ground, seeking its own death. Yes, to Lars Horn, who had already grasped the whereabouts of the Iron Flower Regiment, the train that was moving along the snowfield railway towards Edmonton was already their prey. As expected, they chose the railway owned by Diaz. Isnario Farid, who had arrived near Edmonton first, looked at the information sent back from the snowfield and revealed a smile as if everything was under his control. Originally, this battle against the Iron Flower Regiment had nothing to do with him. At most, he would review the reports that were submitted after the battle was completed. But now, as the heir of the Ishu family, Kalta Ishu, was captured, Isnario's status as Kalta Ishu's guardian did not allow him to do nothing in this matter. Isnario did not resent this, nor did he get angry. For him, this was an opportunity for him to completely control the Ishu family. Duke Farid, the target is about to reach the encirclement. As he was thinking, a message came. I understand. Let McGillis carry out the mission. Yes. After giving the order, Isnario turned around and stood in front of the window in silence. However, the scenery outside the window was not the snowy white that covered the sky and the earth, but the darkness that enveloped the vast space. The flickering traffic lights became the only embellishment in the darkness, reflecting the vague outline of the huge figure hidden in the darkness. A long and narrow head, like a pair of folded wings, the shoulders extended to the sides. Other than that, the vague outline could no longer be seen clearly. The power that led to the birth of Lars Horn? Can I look forward to it a little? The origin of everything. Looking at the vague figure shrouded in darkness, Isnario's eyes revealed a trace of fanaticism. When the cold wind swept down from the Arctic Circle came again, the snow-white wilderness was once again covered by the wind and snow, making it impossible to see where the road ahead was. Only the surrounding facilities that could be used to shelter from the wind and heat were able to survive in this snowstorm. Standing on the observation platform in the first carriage that was specially set up to observe the situation ahead, Olga's expression was solemn. This sudden snowstorm could not only make the road ahead of the Iron Flower Regiment difficult, but could also block Lars Horn's hidden ambush. Regiment Commander Olga, how's the situation? At this time, Lakis appeared in the observation team. Is it Miss Lakis? Yes, I've already made the arrangements. Is that so? Olga's words did not receive Lakis' approval. Raise a little more. Regiment Commander Olga, this snowstorm will not delay Lars Horn's attack. They will soon launch an attack when the blizzard engulfs the land. Lakis' gaze was very solemn, as if her gaze could penetrate the snowstorm and see Lars Horn's hidden ambush. Do you see it? Miss Lakis, Lars Horn's arrangement. Olga seemed to be very surprised by Lakis' foresight. This was because when Lei Minkai and Lakis appeared together in front of the Iron Flower Regiment, Lei Minkai was the one who led all the actions related to the battle, while Lakis was the support. Right now, Before Ray Minkai returned to meet up with the Ironflower Regiment, Lakis said this. No, I didn't see Lars Horn's arrangement, but this is Lars Horn's land. As passers-by, our understanding of this land is far inferior to Lars Horn's, who has ruled this land for 300 years. As if in response to Lakis's words, a sudden sharp whistle tore through the snowstorm and set off a violent explosion in front of the train. Boom! Dazzling flames, and the deafening explosion. Olga's nerves immediately tensed up. Regiment Commander Olga, the enemy's attack is coming. The one who reacted faster than him was Lakis. Understood. Miss Lakis, please retreat to the back as soon as possible. Leave this place to us. Before Olga's footsteps left the observation platform, Lakis's voice came. Regiment Commander Olga, hold on. Freak Outa and Guy will be here soon. The snowstorm was still howling. However, in the dark night where the snow was dancing in the wind, there were bursts of light that constantly lit up. It wasn't the light of human activity. Since the birth of human civilization, it was the traces of blood left behind in history. It was called the traces of battle. Boom, boom, boom. In the snowstorm, cannonballs came from all directions and blew up large holes around the train. The train was shrouded in the threat of being hit by the cannonballs that were even more terrifying than the snowstorm. Woo! Boom! On the train, Barbados waved a mace in his hand and tried to blow up the cannonballs that were flying toward the train under the double cover of the night and the snowstorm. This way, the train wouldn't be hit by the cannonballs. Although this method was somewhat inconceivable, it allowed the train to avoid several fatal threats at this moment. There are so many of them. Olga, do you know where the attack came from? Three Suns and Moon's eyes kept moving around, but they still couldn't find the source of the attack. Looking. Hold on. Three Suns and Moon. It was undoubtedly an extremely difficult task to find Gallahorn, who was hiding in the shadows in a vast snowstorm. Looks like the Ironflower Regiment's tenacity is far beyond our imagination. Galio. In the warm frontline command post, McGillis and Galio stood in front of the screen and watched the train that was still moving at high speed under the sky full of cannonballs. How long can our cannonballs last? Galio's eyebrows were tightly furrowed. Originally, according to their plan, this wave of cannonballs could force the train to stop. But they didn't expect the Ironflower Regiment to risk being hit by the cannonballs to not stop the train. About a few more minutes. Based on their speed, they'll be able to run out of our cannonballs soon. McGillis' eyes flashed with anticipation. Then, to stop the Ironflower Regiment, we'll have to let Glaze's troops go. Chapter 720. The snowstorm that covered the sky gradually stopped. But even if the bright sunlight shone on the snowfield after the snowstorm stopped, the people of the Ironflower Regiment didn't relax at all. Because on the hillside, not far in front of the train, the old friend that had just finished dealing with the Ironflower Regiment appeared there again. In the cold wind, the familiar paint and model made the people of the Ironflower Regiment, who had just rushed out of the bombardment range, tense up. Everyone, take your positions. The ceremony to welcome us is finally over. Looking at the familiar gray night, Olga knew that this would be the last battle before the Ironflower Regiment stepped into Edmonton. Then Barbados, Three Suns and Moon attack. Behind Olga, Gautda Barbados, who had been providing cover for the train from the beginning, jumped out of the carriage and landed in front of the train. At the same time, a red shadow also landed behind Barbados. Hey! You were in the limelight just now, Three Suns and Moon. So now it's my turn and Meteor's turn to show off. Behind Barbados was the Grez meteor that Sino was piloting. Because of the armor just now, Meteor seemed particularly powerless in the face of the terrifying bombardment. Well, the one on the right is mine. Three Suns and Moon twisted his neck and said calmly, Hey! Then the one on the left is mine. Simon chuckled and made the first move. The moment the Meteor's propulsion engine roared, it rushed toward Night Grez on the left side of the hill amidst the snowflakes and snow water that were stirred up by it. This was undoubtedly the signal for the start of the battle. However, the 6th Grez Knight that occupied the hillside on the left and right raised their blades and pointed at the meteor that took the lead. Then a strict and old-fashioned voice sounded. "This is Audiobook, a member of the Gretz Knights of the Earth's Outer Orbit Command Fleet. Now send an announcement to the Ironflower Regiment. Immediately return our Outer Orbit Unified Fleet Commander, Hugh. Otherwise, we will use all necessary means to rescue our Outer Orbit Unified Fleet Commander." However, as soon as the announcement was made, Meteor's attack followed. The 120mm rifle in Meteor's hand ignored the announcement from Audiobook. Under Sino's control, it immediately aimed at the Grez Knight that issued the announcement. The moment the snowflakes mixed with mud were splashed by the whistling bullets, the Grez Knight, targeted by Sino, nimbly dodged the shots from Meteor. In the process of dodging, the pilot, named Audiobook, looked at the incoming Meteor with a solemn expression. Did the negotiation fail? Boom! Seeing Knight Greys repeatedly retreat, Sino immediately changed his attack strategy. Meteor's left hand reached back, and the 9.8mm battle axe on his waist was instantly in his hand. Then, under the cover of the 120mm rifle, the Meteor swung its battle axe at the Grez Knight driven by Audiobook. Clang! The ear-piercing sound of metal colliding suddenly echoed throughout the snowfield, and it also made the surrounding Grez Knights restless. However, before they could make a move, a sharp whistling sound suddenly stopped these restless Grez Knight. Boom! Boom! A wisp of smoke rose from the muzzle of the smoothbore cannon raised by Barbados. 3 suns and moons had already targeted the enemies who were trying to stop Sino's Meteor and Audiobook's Grez Knight that claimed to want the Ironflower Regiment to hand over Calta-Yet-You. Your opponent should be here. Don't look around. Looking at the 5 Grez Knights' quick reaction, 3 suns and moons' eyes showed a trace of killing intent. Since the biggest target had been snatched by Sino, then the remaining 5 Grez Knights were all taken by 3 suns and moons. Boom! Boom! The smoothbore cannon shells constantly bombarded the space between the 5 Grez and Meteor's battle area, using the splashing soil and violent explosions to divide the 2 sides into 2. Then, behind the whistling cannonballs, Gundam Barbados bent its legs and abruptly unleashed the propulsion of the propulsion engine on its back. It swung the large special hammer and spear in its hand, which was the most convenient for the 3 suns and moons. Like a goshawk swooping down on a rabbit, it smashed one of the Gundam Barbados who was careless and was hit by the previous smoothbore cannonball bombardment to the ground. The tall steel body was as fragile as a chicken under the large special hammer spear wielded by Gundam Barbados. It was instantly smashed into the thick snow under its feet. Puff! In the splashing snow and soil, due to the pressure imbalance, under the attack of the large special hammer spear, the engine oil spurted out of the Grez Knight's body like a coward fleeing in panic. It dyed the white snow around the Grez Knight black and white stains. One machine, in the gradually extinguishing light source of the Grez Knight that was paralyzed by the large special hammer spear. 3 suns and moons looked up and stared at the remaining 4 Grez Knights. This attack was a surprise attack launched by Gundam Barbados. A very successful surprise attack. Not only did he take the initiative to kill one of the Grez Knights, but he also made the remaining 4 Grez Knights fall into a panic. Thus, Barbados' hunting time began. In the train, the people watching this battle were not only the people from the Ironflower Regiment, but also Calta-Yet-You, who was forced to disguise as Godelia Lana Bernstein. She recognized at a glance that the Grez Knight team that was in front of the train and engaged in a fierce battle with Meteor, Gundam Barbados, was her subordinate Knight team. The moment the first Grez Knight was hammered into the snow by Barbados, Calta almost turned around and rushed out of the room in an attempt to stop this battle. This battle was tantamount to courting death. "You bunch of idiots!" Calta stopped her footsteps abruptly. She was powerless to do anything. As a captive, she was forced to disguise herself as someone else, let alone move around. Even her appearance was forced to change into someone else's. What could she do to stop this stupid battle? Do you want to leave here? At the door, a figure appeared. It was the maid who disguised Kalta Yet Hugh as Gudelia Lana Bernstein. A rare look of determination appeared on that expressionless face. The maid said, I won't let you leave here. Right now, you're just Gudelia Lana Bernstein. You're not Kalta Yet You. Kalta clenched her fists tightly. A trace of anger surged in her heart. She wanted to resist. But even if she broke through the maid's obstruction, there would be a stronger force to stop her from leaving. I can make them move. Aren't you going to Edmonton? They're my subordinates. Kalta clenched her teeth and tried to persuade the maid. No, you can't persuade them. Because right now, you're not Kalta Yet Hugh, but Gudelia Lana Bernstein. However, the person who answered Kalta was not the maid Fumiton. It was Lakis Klein. The maid bowed and retreated, opening up a path to enter the room. Lakis appeared in front of Kalta. Kalta Yet Hugh. Seems like you still don't understand the changes with Lars Horn. Looking at Lakis' calm gaze, Kalta couldn't help but feel a trace of panic. She didn't know where this trace of panic came from, but the feeling that made her mind chaotic and her limbs tremble was real. Seems like you're aware. If you take off the mask named Gudelia and stand in front of the train and shout for your subordinates to stop attacking, do you think your subordinates will stop attacking? Or perhaps Lars Horn and the troops that participated in this mission to intercept the Ironflower Regiment and rescue Kalta Yet Hugh will stop attacking? Kalta was stunned. Her thoughts ran uncontrollably along the lines of Lakis's words, heading straight for a path that Karta had never thought of, never dared to imagine. 7-star family, Yet You family. The current head of the family had been bedridden for a long time due to illness. Under the treatment of Lars Horn and the top medical team, the seriously ill Yet Hugh family head could still hold on, but his deteriorating body couldn't be reversed with the current medical conditions and technology. Therefore, one day in the future, the Yet Hugh family head, who used to stand at the top of Lars Horn and the 7 people, would inevitably pass away, leaving a mess for his successor, Kalta Yet Hugh. In order to delay such a situation as much as possible, Kalta Yet Hugh, as the successor of the Yet Hugh family, became the commander of the Earth's outer orbit fleet under the operation of the other family heads. This was an opportunity to succeed faster than her peers. At the same time, it was also a trap. Yes, it was a trap. Kalta, who had never thought of this, suddenly realized. Did the many family heads who made her the commander of the Earth's outer orbit fleet really want to help her smoothly take over the position of the Yet Hugh family head? The answer, Kalta didn't know and didn't dare to know. But her out-of-control thoughts weren't under her control at all and continued to leave her in the dust. Farid. Isnario Farid. Would Patriarch Farid, who claimed to be his guardian for the sake of his bedridden father, really be as kind and benevolent as he claimed to be? Would Patriarch Yet Hugh protect him when he became the head of Patriarch Yet Hugh? Silence. Silence. Lux's indifferent words made Kalta, who wanted to resist and escape, fall silent. Fumiton, who was guarding the door, couldn't help but look up and size up Lux, who was calmly looking at the silent girl. Once upon a time, this woman named Lux Klein seemed to be looking at Gudelia Lana Bernstein in the same way. Could it be that this was Lux Klein's intention? At this moment, not only was Kalta Yet Hugh's thoughts running wild, but the maid Fumiton's thoughts were also running wild. Oh! Gauda Barbados swung the heavy, special hammer spear nimbly in his hands. The seemingly heavy hammer body seemed fake, but the moment it smashed into the body or the snowfield, the terrifying weight and the powerful force of Gauda Barbados combined to form a terrifying attack, made the remaining 3 Grez Knight tremble in fear. Yes, just as Kalta fell into a long silence after hearing Lux's words, another soul appeared under Gauda Barbados' hammer spear. And this soul wasn't as lucky as the previous Grez Knight, because just now, just as Gauda Barbados swung the special hammer spear and attacked violently, 3 Remoon was careless and accidentally let Gauda Barbados smash the special hammer spear into a rock protruding from the snow and got stuck. At this moment, the Grez Knight who thought there was an opportunity immediately rushed up to attack Barbados. 120mm rifle, and the attack net created by the battle axe had indeed succeeded in forcing the aggressive Gao de Barbados into a defensive state. However, this didn't mean that Gao de Barbados had fallen into a failed state. Chance. Let's kill it together. 3 Grez Knight holding 120mm rifles suppressed Gao de Barbados's movements very tacitly. The remaining Grez Knight threw away the battle axe in his hand and pulled out the knight's sword at his waist. As he charged with full force, he raised his sword and stabbed toward Gao de Barbados's cockpit. After the battle, just now, these Grez Knight pilots had clearly realized that as long as Gao de Barbados had a chance, they would definitely be the ones to lose. Therefore, it was fine if they didn't move, but once they moved, it would definitely be a fatal blow. Go to hell. Space Mouse. The sharp blade rapidly enlarged in front of 3 Remoon's eyes. 3 Remoon said coldly, "So noisy, so annoying." Ka. Boom. Dust flew up. It was the large special hammer spear that was stuck in the rock before. The moment Gao de Barbados's cockpit was about to be pierced through by the Grez Knight's sword, this heavy and terrifying large special hammer spear actually broke free from the shackles of the earth and slammed toward the Grez Knight's lower body. Dang! The moment the collision between steel and metal exploded, the Grez Knight that stabbed out with the sword was instantly sent flying. But it wasn't over yet. 3 Suns and Moon's right hand, which was holding the control lever, suddenly pulled and pushed. The hammer and spear that had sent Knight Gretz flying was swung up and smashed into the ground from the bottom with a fierce gust of wind. In an instant, the chest of the failed Grez Knight was still smashed with a huge hole. There are still 3 more. 3 Remoon licked his lips, and the fighting spirit in his eyes became more and more blazing. Chapter 721. 3 of them. In fact, even if the remaining 3 Grez Knight occupied a favorable position to surround Gao de Barbados in time, it did not seem to change the fact that they had already become the prey of Gao de Barbados. Hey, good job. 3 days and months. Sino, who was waving his battle axe and engaged in a fierce battle with the Grez Knight piloted by the pilot named Oz, could not help but cheer up when he saw the situation. In an instant, the fierce attack from the meteor caused the Grez Knight piloted by Oz to retreat again and again. The cockpit was almost hit by the meteor's battle axe. Damn it. Damn space rat. The curses on his mouth were endless, but could not change the situation of being suppressed by the meteor. The bonus that the Alea consciousness system brought to the pilot was far beyond the imagination of this skilled pilot named Lars Horn. Now the humans had set foot in the universe. The teenagers who were installed with the Alea consciousness system were destined to become the rats of the world, no matter what the reason was. And the Alea consciousness system was the symbol of these rats. However, after seeing and experiencing the horror of the Alea consciousness system with his own eyes, the pilot named Lars Horn's heart was filled with thoughts that could not accept the reality. However, no matter how he could not accept the reality, Sino, who had the advantage, would not just stay in place and wait for the enemy to come back to his senses and fight with him. Sino knew the principle of beating the dog when it was down, and he was the most loyal executor. The last blow. In the cold wind, the meteor raised the 120mm rifle in his hand and aimed at the Grez Knight, who was under the attack of the battle axe. The Grez Knight did not have time to stand still. The moment the whistling shells rushed out of the barrel, the snow on the ground was rolled up and rushed towards the Grez Knight like a dragon coming out of the sea. Not good. At the critical moment, Oz controlled the body in time to raise the knight's sword in his hand and most likely blocked the vital part of his chest. Bang! Bang! A few armor-piercing bullets roared, and the knight's sword in the Grez Knight's hand was broken. After drawing an arc in the air, it was inserted at the feet of the Grez Knight. In the cold light of the falling blade, it was the cold light of the battle axe swung by the meteor. Sir Calta! At the moment when the cold light tore the cockpit, The pilot named Lars Horn and Kalta, Yethu's most loyal pilot, made a final call. Boom! Under the battle axe, there were traces of blood, as well as Knight Gretz, who had fallen to the ground. Lieutenant Oz! Lieutenant Oz! The Knight broke through the Knight's defense. Under the pilot's and the X's soldiers. The Knights broke through the defense Knight and rushed. The pilot's to the S's. Sino, they're rushing towards you. 3 suns and moons frowned, but they still sounded the alarm. Understood. Look at me. Sino, who had just succeeded, was full of confidence. He ignored the danger of being besieged by the 3 Gretz Knights and laughed as he welcomed the enemy. It seemed that he wanted to continue his efforts and make another achievement that he could boast about in front of the Ironflower Regiment. However, fate seemed to want to play a little joke on Sino. Yes, that's... In order to prevent Sino from being besieged by the enemy, 3 suns and moons, who were trying to control Barbados to support the meteor with the smoothbore cannon, suddenly stopped and looked behind the meteor in confusion. No, to be precise, it was the sky behind the meteor. Nobody knew when. A faintly discernible sound of thunder could be heard from the sky. It was as if something was tearing the sky apart as it rushed towards them at high speed, especially under the control of the sorrowful and angry pilots. When the 3 Gretz Knight surrounded the meteor and launched a fierce attack, the thunder from the sky was even clearer and more shocking. Boom! Amidst the thunder, a color that was different from the blue sky and even more incompatible with the white and flawless snowfield suddenly appeared. And at the moment when everyone except 3 suns and moons could not react in time, it fell from the sky and landed in front of the meteor. Wong! 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 3 rays of cold light arrived first. The 3 Gretz Knight that were besieging the meteor responded, disintegrate. Severed limbs fell to the ground, splashing up snowflakes. In the last scene, captured by the Gretz Knight's electronic eyes, it was the pair of wings of light that had yet to close up and were still shining brightly. How is this possible? This beam plane is still on the other side of the ocean. The moment before the power was completely cut off, the pilots of the Gretz Knight could not accept the scene captured by their beloved devices at the last moment, nor could they accept the scene that they saw. In front of them, no. In the eyes of Lars Horn, who had been monitoring the movements of the Ironflower Regiment for a long time, even if the Frigate had an amazing record of single-handedly destroying the Pacific Fleet, it would still be impossible for him to arrive here from the other side of the ocean in a short time to provide strong and powerful support for the Ironflower Regiment. Because of this, the Earth's Outer Orbit Command Unified Fleet that had lost its commander sent out Kalta Yethu's personal guards to carry out the rescue operation. In the end, they ushered in an outcome that was difficult for them to accept. The blazing heat spread across the snowfield as the wings of light slowly closed up. Wherever it went, the snow melted and flowed in all directions. And in the middle of the melting snow was the airframe that had rushed over from the other side of the ocean and folded its huge steel wings. The Frigate looks like I'm not late. Ray Minkai glanced at the 3 Gretz Knight that had been turned into human sticks by the Frigate and smiled lightly. Your Excellency, you are indeed not late, but my battle results have been snatched by you. Seno cried out in pain. In his opinion, the 3 Gretz Knight that had been turned into human sticks by the Frigate were his battle results. Is that so? Seno, you can't deal with them alone. 3 Remoon opened her mouth to deny Seno's words. Hey, 3 Remoon, how can you slander your family like this? With the arrival of the Frigate, the shadow that shrouded the Ironflower Regiment also dissipated. In a valley in the distance, a deathly silence shrouded the heads of McGillis, Galio, and the others who were monitoring the battlefield. After a long silence, Galio could not help but raise his head and look at McGillis. Major McGillis, do you know of any way to fly an MS from the other side of the ocean to here in a short period of time? McGillis closed his eyes and slowly exhaled as if to calm the fluctuating emotions in his heart. Perhaps, in the eyes of others, This young and promising major was trying to remain calm and not be shocked by the appearance of the free Gouda. But in reality, McGillis was extremely excited. Shocked. Of course, he was shocked. Although he had expected this, when he personally saw the free Gouda, who was supposed to be on the other side of the ocean, unexpectedly appear on this snowfield, McGillis knew that everything that he had been waiting for finally welcomed a ray of light. Agent Major McGillis. Galileo saw that McGillis did not answer his question for a long time and could not help but call out. Oh, sorry. Galileo, I'm thinking of something. McGillis apologized for his absent-mindedness and shook his head. Sorry, Galileo. From what I know, even with Lars Horn's latest transportation technology, it is impossible to send an MS from the other side of the ocean to here in such a short period of time. Moreover, it can enter the battle at the same time. McGillis paused for a moment and continued. You have to know that the current weather is not something that an ordinary body can withstand. In order to prevent the body from being affected by the extreme cold, the body must undergo a period of warm-up before it can operate normally. So, Galileo moved the corner of his mouth, but did not continue. So, this body's performance is far more terrifying than what we imagined. McGillis had a faint smile on his face, and Galileo could not figure out what he was thinking. This was the first time something like this had happened. Then, should we continue to pursue? Pursue. Why shouldn't we pursue? Our mission is to stop Shermiao Higuchi and Gudelia Lana Bernstein from entering Edmonton. The train to Edmonton started its journey again. However, this time, he was full of confidence. Not because of anything else. It was because Gouda and Ray Minkai, who were separated from the Iron Flower Regiment, finally arrived to reunite with the Iron Flower Regiment. With the help of Gouda, the Iron Flower Regiment, including Olga, believed that no matter how strong the enemy was, they would be able to defeat them. Sir, welcome back. Looking at Ray Minkai standing in front of him, Olga finally let out a sigh of relief. In the snowfield, when he was bombarded by Lars Horn, it would be a lie to say that he was not nervous. Even if he had expected that Gallahorn would not kill him because of Kalta Yethu's existence, he would not have killed him. But after witnessing the artillery fire that plowed back and forth across the snowy plain, Olga could not help but have a feeling of being reborn. Looks like Commander Olga went through an intense and exciting journey. Lei Minkai glanced at Olga's relieved expression, but he didn't point it out. After casually teasing him, he changed the topic. Commander Olga, tell everyone to get ready. The next journey will probably be Lars Horn's full attack. This was inevitable, and it was bound to happen. Gouda's strength was obvious to all, but it did not scare Lars Horn. I understand. Olga nodded. When he was about to turn around and arrange the mission, the bombardment suddenly came again. Boom, boom. The sound of the bombardment echoed through the snowfield and set off waves of terrifying explosions around the train. Not only did the powerful shockwave of the explosion overturn the entire snowfield, it also forced the speeding train to a stop. Commander! Sir! The railway in front. Before the news from the train finished, Ray Minkai already knew what happened. The thing he was most worried about finally happened. No matter what kind of preparations the train had made, the most worrying and most terrifying thing of this trip had still happened. In the end, Gallahorn still blew up the railway. And it was not only in one place. Facing the bombardment, Ray Minkai, who came to the observation post, saw through the flames and smoke rising into the air and saw the railway that was blown up in at least 3 places. Even if the train had emergency repair tools and materials, it would be difficult to repair the damaged railway in a short period of time. Olga, there's no other way. Get ready to get off. Understood. Please, sir. With the current situation, even if Ray Minkai wanted to greet Lux, it would be difficult to do so, because Gouda attacked again. After crossing the ocean and arriving at the snowfield, Gouda did not have time to rest before it was time to attack again. Amidst the bombardment, the pair of wings of light that bloomed on the train was captured by McGillis's binoculars. Galileo, the beam-wing plane, is moving again. I know. I can see it from here, too. Behind McGillis was a Samanli Gundam that had been specially fitted with special leg components in order to adapt to Earth's gravitational environment. Perhaps it would be more appropriate to call it the Samanli Gundam Cavalry. The newly added special leg parts would normally fight in a bipedal state, but according to the needs of the battlefield, it could switch to a bipedal state at any time. Together with the suspension parts on the skirt armor, Gauda's Samanli could explode with unimaginable speed in the shortest amount of time. Although it couldn't fly, relying on the high-speed performance brought by this floating state, it was enough to give Galio the confidence to compete with the Freedom Gundam. After all, the prerequisite for attacking Gauda was to reach the same speed as it. Galio, who had fought against the Freedom Gundams in close combat, had a deep understanding of this. Boom! Boom! In the hillside behind the Samanli cavalry, there was a continuous barrage of artillery fire. At the same time, the reconnaissance planes that Lars Horn rarely used in normal battles also rose into the air and arrived at the snowfield where the Iron Flower Regiment's train was. They were prepared to provide vision assistance to the Samanli Gauda cavalry charging into the snowfield. Can't work? McGillis. Looking at the recon planes flying away, Galio was also uncertain. I don't know, but this is the only method we can use now. McGillis' eyes flickered as he looked at the receding reconnaissance planes. In his eyes, these reconnaissance planes were only futile and would die in vain. Chapter 722. A large-scale combat situation. Under the command of the Command Center, Lars Horn's active NK-17S lifted the missile compartments installed on both sides of the fuselage. They pointed at the snowfield in the distance that had been bombarded not long ago and had not stopped until now. They fired the missiles that had just been resupplied and were immediately fired. The whistling sound of the missiles soaring into the air was endless. McGillis stood in front of the frontline command center with his hands behind his back. He stared at the neatly arranged NK-17S that occupied the valley. Such a scene had never appeared when he learned about Lars Horn's existence and the current state of the world. As the ruler of human society for 300 years, Lars Horn's once powerful enemies had long been eliminated. The remaining enemies did not need to use such an exaggerated military force. The NK-17S that continuously fired, resupplied, and fired again were like a precision steel machine. They moved back and forth on the launch site according to the command center's instructions. They constantly rotated between resupply and firing. Looking at the smoke from the missiles that had not been dispersed by the cold wind, there were the missiles that streaked across the sky and fell toward the snowfield in the distance. Even from a distance, one could still see the rocks and trees that were blown into the sky by the terrifying bombardment. No one could imagine whether a body of flesh and blood could survive such a terrifying bombardment. But McGillis knew that the enemies of Lars Horn and the enemies that caused Lars Horn to go to such lengths would not be eliminated by this bombardment. Especially the body named Freedom Gauda. Boom. Boom. The sea of missiles that fell from the sky were like hard-working farmers. They plowed the snowfield where the train was located back and forth several times. In the end, a lucky one that was born from the sea of missiles finally broke through the thick smoke above the snowfield and plunged into one of the carriages of the train that was forced to stop by the intense bombardment. Boom! The explosion set off by the missile warhead not only destroyed the carriage, but also affected the carriage that stored the ammunition next to it. In an instant, an earth-shattering explosion resounded through the snowfield. The terrifying mushroom cloud caused by the explosion of the ammunition suddenly broke through the thick smoke formed by the previous bombardment and appeared above the snowfield. Is it over? Looking at the mushroom cloud rising into the sky from afar, McGillis heard bursts of cheers. But McGillis was unmoved. The bombardment had been going on for quite some time. If Taiwan Regiment if Freedom Gauda could be dealt with so easily, then the Pacific Fleet would not have been wiped out. Even if they were in the temporarily safe cave, Olga could still see the reconnaissance planes that were hovering above the snowfield, constantly monitoring the movements of the bombarded snowfield. Your Excellency, so now we can only wait for the bombardment to end? Olga retracted her gaze and asked softly. Wait. Raymond Kai's answer was very simple. Although Lars and Horn's bombardment is scary, it is not endless. Presumably, the moment the bombardment stopped, Gallahorn's MS team would launch a new round of attacks. At that time, this place will definitely be discovered. When they came to this hidden cave, Ray Minkai used Gao Da's flight characteristics to conceal the Iron Flower Regiment's trajectory on the snowfield. But it could not hide from the Team MS that personally set foot on the snowfield. I understand. Then Babados and Meteor will cover everyone from now on. Ray Minkai nodded and agreed with Olga's arrangement. Olga, if Xiao Hong can't hold it in, we can let him activate Gusion. Now that things have developed to this point, there's no need to be obsessed with the disguise. Yes, understood. The whistling sound that swept across the sky gradually subsided. The gradually thinning tail smoke was also blown away by the increasingly fierce cold wind, and it no longer had the momentum of covering the sky and the sun from before. And on the snowfield, the terrifying bombardment also began to become sparse. Until the last explosion sounded, the reconnaissance aircraft hovering in the sky changed its attitude and quickly descended. It followed the edge of the snowfield and flew all the way to the center area that was the most heavily bombarded. The reconnaissance aircraft continuously transmitted everything it saw back to the rear. After being forwarded by the frontline command center, it was transmitted to the Gundam Simonese cavalry, standing on a hillside on the west side of the snowfield. Is the bombardment over? That guy, McGillis, had actually emptied the nearby Gallahorn's ammunition vault without hesitation. After Galio, who had been waiting for a long time, received the news, it was finally time to move out. Everyone, attack! Don't miss any clues. Iron Flower Regiment, that group of space rats must still be alive. Yes, Major Galio. In the blink of an eye, the Team MS led by Gauda and Samonli cavalry rushed into the bombarded land from the west side of the snowfield under the guidance of the reconnaissance aircraft. It has begun. Olga and Lars and Horn's Team MS have begun to search this area. Ray Minkai, who was constantly watching the reconnaissance aircraft hovering in the sky, slowly exhaled. Then, I wish you all the best. Next, Ray Minkai's mission was the most demanding one. With Gauda as bait, he had to cover the Iron Flower Regiment as much as possible from the south side of the snowfield toward Edmonton. Apologize to Lakis for me. With the roar of the engines starting, Gauda, who once again spread out his steel wings, rushed out of the cave and rushed toward the reconnaissance aircraft in the sky like a sharp arrow. The key to the next operation was to delay the Iron Flower Regiment's discovery as much as possible. Every second the Iron Flower Regiment was discovered by Lars and Horn meant that the Iron Flower Regiment could reach Edmonton a second earlier. Woo woo woo. Gauda, who suddenly appeared in the sky, did not give Lars and Horn's reconnaissance aircraft any time to react. Under the roar of the Vulcan cannon on Gauda's head, the reconnaissance aircraft exploded in the sky one after another, turning into fragments that scattered across the devastated snowfield. Below, Galio immediately discovered the figure of Gauda, who was targeting the reconnaissance aircraft. Quick! Protect the reconnaissance aircraft and retreat. Galio's reaction was not slow. He understood that the reconnaissance aircraft were the eyes of the Team MS to monitor the snowfield. If these eyes were all shot down by Gauda, they might not even be able to lock onto Gauda's figure, let alone monitor the Iron Flower Regiment's whereabouts. The Team MS, led by Gauda and Samonli cavalry, quickly raised the shooting weapons in their hands and fired wildly at the Gauda, who was chasing after the reconnaissance aircraft. Under the dense rain of bullets, the pilot of Lars and Horn's reconnaissance aircraft, who wanted to escape, pushed the control stick and quickly lowered the nose of the aircraft, rushing toward the Team MS, led by Gauda and Samonli cavalry. This was an act of desperation. If he was not careful, even if the reconnaissance aircraft was not shot down by Gouda in the sky, he might still die under the attacks of his allies. That lunatic, pay attention to the shooting distance. Don't accidentally hurt your allies. Galileo cursed in a low voice as soon as he saw the reconnaissance aircraft's movement, but his actions became even more careful. Da-da-da-da. From the bottom to the top, the bullets whistled towards the sky, constantly flying under the belly of the reconnaissance aircraft and passing by both sides of the wings, trying to stop the Freedom Gundam that was chasing after this life-risking reconnaissance aircraft. However, this reconnaissance aircraft, which did not hesitate to gamble its life in order to escape, was ultimately unable to escape from Gouda's hands. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The moment the fire god cannon on Gouda's head roared again, the reconnaissance aircraft was blown up on the spot, right in front of Galileo's eyes. Just as the reconnaissance aircraft was about to be able to quickly pull up the nose and escape from the head of Gouda and some Manly cavalry, it was blown up by Gouda in the air. The explosion that was close at hand instantly drowned the screen in front of Galileo's eyes, and it also stopped the attack of the Team MS, led by Gouda and some Manly cavalry. The roar of the reconnaissance aircraft's explosion in the air had not yet faded away, and the cold wind that followed blew away the billowing smoke, leaving only the broken pieces that fell in the snowfield and the steel wings that appeared behind the smoke. This is simply looking at Freedom Gouda, who was looking down at him like a god. Galileo's teeth were tightly clenched. The scene just now was undoubtedly a slap in the face. The reconnaissance aircraft pilot, who did not hesitate to gamble with his life, swooped down with the attitude of believing in his allies, and tried to rely on the help of Galileo and the others to escape, was blown up by Gouda in the air. How could Galileo endure this humiliation? Gray's team, cover me. In the midst of the roar, Gouda and some Manly cavalry transformed into a high-speed hovering four-legged state and charged straight at Freedom Gouda. Behind them, the 6 Greys mechs immediately scattered. While cooperating with the charging rhythm of Gouda and some Manly cavalry, they raised the 120mm rifles in their hands and fired from the left and right sides. But the scene that happened in front of them made the Greys mechs puzzled. Facing the 6 Greys mechs shooting, Freedom Gouda did not move at all, exposing himself to the Greys mechs shooting crosshairs like a fixed target. Don't be scared. Continue to attack. Galileo also noticed Freedom Gouda's strange behavior, but he would not stop because of this, and he would not allow his subordinates to be scared. Understood. The roar of the 120mm rifle resounded through the sky at this moment. But in the next second, the whistling bullets only landed on Freedom Gouda's body, creating inconspicuous sparks. What? Gray's attack did not work. Looking at the sparks that continued to appear on Freedom Gouda's body, the Greys mechs were a little shaken. What kind of sturdy armor is this? This was not the first time Galileo witnessed Freedom Gouda's PS armor that was almost immune to all live ammunition attacks. But he still couldn't help but exclaim. A mech with such sturdy armor was undoubtedly a godlike existence on the battlefield. The MS that was mainstream in the human world now, and the live ammunition carried by mobile engineers would not cause any damage at all. Is this the reason why the Pacific Fleet was destroyed? Boom! Suddenly, the sound of the wind rose. A black shadow suddenly appeared in front of Gouda's Manly cavalry. Galileo instinctively controlled the Manly to raise the knight's lance in his right hand to block, but he did not expect the terrifying power contained in the black shadow to be able to interrupt the charge of Gouda's Manly cavalry and forcibly stop it in place. Galileo, who finally stabilized the mech's balance, took a closer look and found that the culprit that interrupted the charge of Gouda's Manly cavalry was actually Freedom Gouda's rarely used shield. Chapter 723. The thunder-like movement from behind the mountains had already reached the sky above Edmonton. The well-informed people naturally knew the reason for the commotion that started at dawn and spread to the sky above Edmonton. That was Lars Horn's action against the Ironflower Regiment. No, it should be said that it was against the Ironflower Regiment that was escorting the former Abro representative, Miao Donghu, back to Edmonton. The thunderous rumbling was undoubtedly the terrifying commotion caused by Gallowhorn using her fists and legs to declare her strength. Rumble, in the cold wind, the thunder-like sound became clearer and clearer, making people tremble with fear. It was not the roar of nature. It was the rumble caused by the detonation of the killing weapons created by humans. We are finally here. On the rooftop of a building in the suburbs of Edmonton, a burly old man with white hair slowly took a breath. He was the one who had temporarily parted ways with the Ironflower Regiment on the ocean earlier. With the help of the Long Fong Lion, he crossed the ocean and finally returned to Edmonton at this critical moment. He was Mao Donggu. Teacher Miao, there is not much time left before the meeting begins. We must set off immediately. Eudelia's voice came from behind Miao, and a gust of wind followed closely. Miao turned around and looked at the girl in the red dress who was standing not far behind her. She moved her gaze further back. There, a male lion with a height of 3 to 4 meters and a length of about 10 meters with a steel body was lying there. Your Excellency, are you ready? This steel lion was the Longfong lion that had led Miao and Eudelia across the ocean. However, the current State Zero had changed from the original Longfong lion form to the wild lion form that was suitable for moving freely in the city. After all, in terms of size, the wild lion form was much smaller than the Longfong lion's form 0. Yes, we can set off at any time. However, on the way to the city, some unpleasant things may happen. You must be mentally prepared for this. The steel lion raised its head and looked at the bridge that Lars Horn had blown up. There is only one bridge left that could enter the city, but it had to face Lars Horn's tightly sealed bridge. Hearing this, Miao turned her head and looked at the only intact bridge for a while before nodding silently. That can't be helped. We have to hurry, don't we? Yes. Teacher Miao. Eudelia nodded and looked solemnly at the Longfong lion. The last journey, I will leave it to you. Your Excellency. The laughter of confidence slowly sounded. The Longfong lion lowered its head, and the stairs condensed by faint light appeared in front of Miao and Eudelia. Come up. If you're late because of me, Guy won't let me off. Ha 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 ha. Your Excellency, State Zero, you were joking. Whether it is you or His Excellency Ray Minkai, I am full of confidence in both of you. In the roar of the beast, the Longfong lion, carrying Miao and Eudelia, jumped down from the rooftop and then disappeared in the air with a ripple, leaving only the sound of the wind sweeping towards Edmonton. Under the sharp blades of the swords, the trees that were covered in thick snow were cut into pieces, while the broken branches and leaves that fell from them were turned into powder amidst the snow and mud under the trampling of the steel giants that were caught in the fierce battle. Buzz! The roar of the Ahab furnace, which was constantly bursting with higher power, echoed in the frozen forest. Amidst the rumbling, there was also the sound of metal clashing against metal. It was MS. It was a battle between MS. The Glazers, who were flying close to the ground at high speed, were advancing and retreating in an orderly manner to besiege a Gauda that had steel wings, but then retracted them and only used the shield and blade in its hands to deal with the attacks. The Free Gauda, behind the Glazers, the Samonli Gauda hovered around the battlefield in a four-legged form and stared at the Free Gauda, not flying, only using the sword and shield to deal with our attacks. Does this mean that even if they don't fly, they can still deal with us? Beam-wing aircraft. Galileo clearly remembered that when the last reconnaissance aircraft was blown up in the air, the Samonli Gauda that he was piloting was also hit by the shield thrown by the Free Gauda. The wound was clearly visible on the body of the knight's lance in the Samonli's hand. The Glazers' joint attack was full of murderous intent. Even Galio himself couldn't guarantee that he could hold on for a while under the siege of this skillful and well-coordinated glaziers. Buzz! The bone-chilling wind swept up the accumulated snow on the tree branches, bringing with it a low, buzzing sound. It was the trembling of the blade. It was the low hum of the Freedom Gundam's blade as it vibrated. Then, with the cooperation of his teammates, Gretz, who tried to launch a surprise attack from the left side of the Freedom Gundam, which was blocked by the shield, was slashed in half. Bang! The heavy steel body slowly landed on the thick snow along with the sword light that flashed from behind the shield, causing snowflakes to splash. Retreat. Reorganize the formation. Galio immediately noticed that something was wrong. But before he could react, the first victim of the Glazer's forces appeared. The Free Gao Da's Samonli cavalry almost turned into a stream of light as it rushed through the path that the Glazer's forces opened up. With the Knight's Lance, it launched a fierce attack at the Free Gao. Do you hear? Galio. The Gao Da's Samonli cavalry that had been wandering around the periphery didn't make Ray Minkai lower his guard. Instead, Ray Minkai paid more attention to it. The attack just now was not only to break up the Glazer's formation that was besieging the Free Gao Da, but also to attract the attention of Galio and the Free Gao Da Samonli. Obviously, this little trick was very effective. With just one sword strike, the Free Gao Da Samonli, no, it should be Galio, who was wandering around and waiting for an opportunity, wasn't as calm as Ray Minkai imagined. Under the feet of the Free Gao Da's Samonli cavalry were the blazing flames set off by the 4 Ahab thrusters, which were mixed with the melting snow. At a glance, the Free Gao Da's Samonli cavalry indeed had the momentum of a medieval heavy knight's charge. Facing such a terrifying heavy cavalry attack, the Free Gao didn't dodge. He just raised a shield and sword and assumed a defensive posture. However, it was this attitude that ignited Galio's anger. Is that all? Is this how you deal with the Samonli's attack? Beam wing. In Galio's imagination, the most likely scenario was that the Free Gao Da would choose to soar into the air to avoid the Gao Da's attack. At that time, Galio would definitely activate the backup plan that he had already arranged to ambush the Free Gao Da. But, at the crucial moment of this plan's activation, the Free Gao Da was actually like a lone soldier on an ancient battlefield. He raised the shield in his hand alone to receive the full power of the knight's attack. A sure kill attack. Sure kill? Sure kill? Sure kill? No. The attack of the Free Gao Da's Samonli cavalry that had reached the limit of speed could possibly be the strongest attack that Lars Horn's pilots could unleash. But Ray Minkai had already seen through this attack. Instead of retreating, the Free Gao Da advanced and took the initiative to raise his shield to receive the attack of the Free Gao Da's Samonli cavalry. Boom! The ear-piercing sound of metal colliding swept through the forest, but it wasn't the end of this narrow path battle. Dazzling sparks crazily jumped out from the contact point between the knight's spear and the shield, deeply piercing Galio's eyes. He didn't expect that the Free Gao Da's shield would actually be so sturdy. It was so sturdy that even the full power attack of the Free Gao Da's Samonli cavalry couldn't break through it. Could it be? Could it be this damned shield was also made from that strange armor? Suddenly, Galio felt a cold light erupting from the corner of his eyes. In the cold light, Galio's heart palpitated, causing him to subconsciously pull back the control lever. Swoosh! The cold light suddenly appeared, and the spear of the knight that was unable to retreat in time was actually broken. Under the gaze of the retreating Free Gao Da's Samonli cavalry, the spear fell powerlessly onto the thick snow. The deadly charge launched by the Free Gao Da's Samonli cavalry failed. Agent Major Badwin, we're here to support you. Seeing that the Free Gao Da's Samonli cavalry's attack was thwarted, the retreating Gretz troops hurriedly went forward to cover them. Before Galio could stop his troops from supporting him, he was shocked to find that the Free Gao Da in front of him had unknowingly disappeared. No, not good. Quickly retreat. Just as this terrifying thought appeared in Galio's mind, behind the Free-Gao Das Samonli cavalry, the 5 Free-Gao Das Samonli cavalry, something happened. After image. Yes, after image. Perhaps it was because the Free-Gao had retracted his steel wings after destroying all the reconnaissance aircraft, causing people to have the misconception that the steel wings could not be used consecutively. However, reality played a small joke on the Gretz pilots. It was not that the Radiant Bearer could not be used consecutively. It was just that Ray Minkai had delayed it slightly. Now, the Iron Flower Regiment had most likely entered Edmonton's territory. Moreover, just a moment ago, State Zero had sent back a message. Sher Miao and Gedelia had arrived in Edmonton first, and with Sher Miao's assistance, they successfully entered the Parliament building where the representative meeting would be held. At present, Ray Minkai and the Iron Flower Regiment could be said to have grasped the initiative. Dazzling afterimages bloomed all over the snowfield. The high-frequency vibration blade in the Freedom Gundam's hand wantonly swept up bursts of sword light within the formation of the 5 Grez, following the appearance of the gorgeous afterimages. Whether it was the Free-Gao Da's high-frequency vibration sword, the Free Gretz raised their battle axes to block, or even try to trade blows with their lives, they could not withstand even one move from the high-frequency vibration sword in Free-Gao Da's hand. Bang! Before the battle axes could fall on the snowfield, their owners had already been one step ahead, sending snowflakes flying and falling into endless death. Stop! 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 Not long ago, the Free-Gao Das Gretz were still able to exchange blows with the Free-Gao Da, but now they were suddenly so weak. The Free-Gao Da cut them down like grass, and the scene was unacceptable to Galio. I told you to stop. At this moment, Galio's anger had completely drowned out his rationality. Under this anger, the Gao de Samonli cavalry burst out faster and more ferocious than before. The knight's spear was cut off? It doesn't matter. The Gao de Samonli cavalry still has the knight's sword. In the instant of the rapid charge, the Gao de Samonli cavalry not only raised the knight's spear that had been cut off, but also pulled out the knight's sword of the waist and put on an expression of not giving up until one of them died, and charged at the Free-Gao Da without any regard for their lives. Buzz! The Free-Gao Da swung his sword and cut off the hands of the nearest Free-Gao Da. But unexpectedly, the Free-Gao Da cavalry charged forward without any regard for their lives. Agent Major Badwin, don't worry about me. Hurry! At that moment, Ray Minkai heard the voice of the Gretz's pilot in front of him. A life for a life. The sight of the Free-Gao Da cavalry was already half blocked by the Gretz, and behind the Gretz, the Gao de Samonli cavalry was charging rapidly. What are you doing? Get out of the way. Galio's right hand trembled, and he almost pulled the lever. Agent Major Badwin, don't care about us. Hurry. Maybe it was intentional. Maybe it was because of the influence of the Gretz, whose hands were cut off. Or maybe it was because of the absolute power displayed by the Free-Gao Da cavalry. Seeing that their teammates were using such an extreme method to provide cover for the attack of the Gao de Samonli cavalry, the remaining Gretzes immediately took similar actions. Bang! 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 It was mentioned before that if the Free-Gao Da cavalry soared into the air when facing the charge of the Gao Da cavalry, Galio would definitely launch the ambush he had prepared beforehand. And at this moment, the method that he had never used before was used. However, it was used in this tragic and stirring scene in front of him. At this moment, not only was the Free-Gao Da cavalry's vision blocked, but even his limbs were bound by the claws of the remaining Gretzes, and he couldn't move at all. There was no doubt. The Free-Gao Da cavalry was now like a fish on the chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. The wind suddenly blew. The broken half of the knight's lance of the Gao Da cavalry was about to pierce through the back of the Gretz, and then through the chest of the Free-Gao Da cavalry. The Gretz, who was supposed to block the vision of the Free-Gao Da cavalry, suddenly moved and was sent flying by a huge force. He rolled and fell from the air. Almost at the same time, a black shadow arrived first and blocked the knight's lance of the Gao Da cavalry at the critical moment. The attack of the Gao de Samonli cavalry was suddenly broken by more than half, and it was almost defeated. But it wasn't over yet. The next second after the knight's lance was blocked, a sword light flashed from below, and the left arm of the Gao de Samonli cavalry was cut off on the spot. It fell at the feet of the Gao de cavalry. Agent Major Baduin, be careful, retreat. As soon as the exclamations of his subordinates sounded, afterimages appeared on the screen in front of Galio again. Like the Grim Reaper harvesting lives, the remaining Glazers were killed one by one, turning them into corpses scattered across the vast expanse of snow. The situation was reversed in an instant. Chapter 724. The blade that caused the cold wind from the Arctic Circle to tremble was right in front of Gao Da's Samonli cavalry. Under Galio's gaze, the incomparably sharp blade had already easily killed all of Gray's troops that were still able to firmly control Gao, defacing the blade that took away all of his subordinates. Galio suddenly felt that the plan he made from the very beginning was laughable. Even if he constantly speculated about the enemy's strength based on the clues he knew in the battle records, when Gauda appeared in front of him again, Galio discovered that his speculations did not reach the upper limit of Gao Da's strength at all. Is this the place where I will be buried? Galio gripped the joystick tightly, gritted his teeth, and looked at the pair of light wings on the screen in front of him. He was not willing. He was not willing to die just like this. He still wanted to personally witness the new world and new order described by his close friend McKillis, as well as the new Lars Horn, who personally brought the new order to this world. No, I can't die. The despair in the face of death instantly ignited the flame of hope. Galio pushed with both hands, and Gao Da's Samonli cavalry burst forth with unprecedented power. In an instant, it raised the broken knight's lance and bravely rushed towards Gauda. This attack, if not death, then life. This was the choice Galio made in the face of death. Rei Minkai's gaze changed slightly, but his movements were not slow at all. Gauda raised his shield with his left hand and stabbed forward with his sword with his right hand. Once again, he blocked Gauda's Samonli cavalry's lance and launched a counterattack by stabbing into the cockpit. With this attack, the outcome was instantly decided. However, just as the weapons of both sides were about to touch each other, Gao Da's movements suddenly changed. He did not advance, but retreated. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared in front of Gao Da's Simonese cavalry, leaving only the afterimage pierced by the knight's spear. Galio, who was focused on surviving the desperate situation, did not know, nor did he have time to react. However, Rei Minkai had already sensed the strangeness that caused him to make the decision to withdraw. A black shadow broke through the cold wind and landed on Gao Da's previous position, at the foot of Gao Da's Samonli cavalry. The cold glint of the blade stunned Galio for a moment, but he still couldn't react. Stand down. Galio, you're no match for it. At this moment, a familiar voice sounded. For some reason, when Galio heard this voice, he felt like he could relax a little. Major McGillis, you're here. Small windows popped up on the screen in front of Galio's eyes. Finally, the camera focused on the red steel giant standing on the snow-covered hill. Galingia. Rei Minkai also noticed the red steel giant. Unlike Galio, Rei Minkai recognized it at first glance. Major McGillis, are you the one sitting inside Galingia? McGillis's chuckle could be heard the moment Gao Da's message reached the red steel giant. It's just as Mr. K said. You are indeed not an ordinary person. There seemed to be another meaning behind these words of praise. However, McGillis didn't give Rei Minkai, or rather, Galio, the time to react. Galio, leave this to me. The Iron Flower Regiment is already close to Edmonton. If this continues, the Iron Flower Regiment will definitely fight Lars Horn's army stationed in Edmonton. Wait. McGillis, you want to face this terrifying monster alone? McGillis could naturally hear Galio's anxiety. However, he had already made up his mind. Moreover, there was something deep in his heart that he wanted to verify with Gauda and Rei Minkai. Go. Galio. Galingia's capabilities are not as simple as you think. McGillis's voice had just faded when the red steel giant on top of the white hill swept down like a gust of wind. It waved the two orange swords in its hands, which were called Valkyrie's war blades, and launched a whirlwind attack on Gauda. Bang, bang, bang. In an instant, Galingia, who had made the first move, actually managed to suppress Gauda with a gust of wind attack. Galio was dumbfounded by the frenzied attacks that came one after another. He simply couldn't imagine that this unfamiliar mech, which he had never seen or heard of before, could actually have the capability to fight against a Freedom Gundam. Galio, go! Galingia's attacks can only last for a short period of time. Now is your chance. Only you can stop the Iron Flower Regiment. While McGillis piloted Galingia's crazy attacks, he also constantly urged Galio to leave the battlefield. Galio was unwilling to give up. He even trembled all over and struggled not to turn around and leave like McGillis said. He still wanted to stay here and continue fighting. Agent Major Galio, don't forget your mission. Your subordinates. Your subordinates. In order to protect you. In order to complete their mission. Don't forget. Galingia's Valkyrie's war blades collided with Gao Da's two swords. The ear-piercing sounds constantly battered Galio's heart. Moreover, McGillis's impolite, even cold and emotionless words converged into an even more penetrating force that pierced through Galio's heart. McGillis, right now, I'm going to deal with the Iron Flower Regiment. Before I come back, don't die. Tears of unwillingness flowed down from Galio's eyes, wantonly sliding down his face and wetting his collar. That heart-wrenching roar accompanied by Gao Da Simonian cavalry's rapid retreat gradually disappeared from McGillis's ears, until Gao Da's Simonian cavalry's signal completely disappeared from Galingia and Gao Da's radar range. The two sides that should have been fighting to the death strangely stopped and faced each other in the cold wind. What good show! Agent Major McGillis farted. From Galio's point of view, Galingia's fierce wind attack had indeed suppressed Gauda. However, the reason for that scene was Rei Mingkai's secret cooperation. Otherwise, no matter how sharp Galingia's Valkyrie blade was, it still wouldn't be able to contend against Gao Da's high-frequency vibration sword. In fact, the moment they met, the high-frequency vibration blade at full power could even cut Galingia's Valkyrie blade in half. No, what I said just now is true. Your Excellency, Rei Mingkai. I didn't deceive Galio. In the face of Rei Mingkai's mocking words, McGillis was rather calm. Is that so? Then, appearing in front of me now is also to prevent me from reuniting with the Iron Flower Regiment? As Rei Mingkai spoke, Gauda raised his sword and pointed it at Galingia. It seemed that if McGillis' answer was wrong, Gauda would violently attack and kill Galingia, who was blocking Rei Mingkai and Gauda from reuniting with the Iron Flower Regiment. Ka! Bang! In the next moment, Rei Mingkai frowned slightly. The reason was that when facing the threat of the Freedom Gundam, Galingia actually withdrew her two Valkyrie blades. Your Excellency Rei Mingkai, I don't mean to be your enemy. On the contrary, I have some things I want to verify with you. As if to increase his persuasiveness, McGillis added a condition after that. Of course, this isn't a request, it's a deal. As long as I get the answer I want from your Excellency, then I will tell you everything I know without reservation. Just as McGillis finished speaking, there was a buzzing sound in the sky. McGillis' gaze changed, and his hands subconsciously began to move, but unexpectedly, the screen in front of him began to slowly move up. It wasn't until the pure white hills turned gray and the clear blue sky that McGillis realized with a start that Galingia, who he was piloting, had been cut down to the ground without him knowing. The vibration that could not be offset by the buffer device and was directly transmitted to McGillis was the most powerful proof. That should be enough, right? McGillis, the pitiful person who chased after Bailey. Immediately after, the words that came along with the blade that appeared on the screen struck McGillis' heart in the deepest part of his heart. Ever since that night when he had read the book called The Biography of a Gunica Ku, it had been buried in the deepest part of his heart. It was the true meaning and desire to pursue the undead known as the supreme power. McGillis subconsciously wanted to refute, but he couldn't say anything. Agunakakaru and the existence called ultimate power, Bailai. This is the true meaning you're chasing after. Raymond Kai's words struck McGillis' heart like rolling thunder, peeling off the steel armor that he had put on his heart for more than 10 years. However, just as it was about to pierce McGillis' heart, Gouda moved the blade away, and Raymond Kai's words stopped. "Are you satisfied now, McGillis?" At this moment, McGillis finally had a chance to catch his breath, allowing his spirit, which was about to be crushed by Raymond Kai, to recover. After a while, the door of Jerlinjade's cockpit opened against the cold wind. McGillis, whose existence was completely exposed to the cold wind, walked out of the cockpit, only to find that the Jerlinjade he was piloting had been turned into a human stick. In that moment just now, as McGillis breathed in, the cold air wantonly attacked his lungs, dispersing the trace of turbid thoughts. Only calmness was left to dominate McGillis's thoughts. "Yes, thank you very much for the answer, sir. I already know what I want to do. Then, in exchange, I will tell you the true goal of Lars Horn. No, that man called his Nerio Farid." McGillis paused. After taking a few deep breaths of the cold air, he looked up and stared at Gouda for a long time. Sitting in Gouda's cockpit, Ray Minkai could see the longing and desire in the depths of McGillis' eyes. He could also see the madness called paranoia in the depths of McGillis' eyes. Isnario Farid wants to use some method to awaken and control the drone named Hasmon, which has been asleep since the end of the sacrificial war. He wants to use this to strengthen his power within Lars Horn, and finally achieve a plot to use Lars Horn as a springboard to become the supreme overlord of humanity. When Lei Minkai heard this news, he subconsciously wanted to laugh a few times, but in the next second, he stopped this thought. Was it funny? Funny. However, it was possible for it to happen. Even though, in Lei Minkai's memory, the AI drone named Hasmon was developed with the purpose of exterminating all human beings when it was first created. But now, in this world where people from another world, including Ray Minkai, had interfered, anything that could cause the original direction of history to be distorted was possible. As the wind swept through the forest, Gouda, with its beautiful wings of light, rose into the air and quickly disappeared in front of McGillis. At the same time, there was the sound of footsteps on snow behind McGillis. "You're here, Mr. K." McGillis didn't need to turn around to know who the person next to him was. "Yes, I've been here since the moment Glenjade was turned into a human stick by Gouda Mr. McGillis. The person who came was Mr. K, Lou Lucio." Like McGillis, he raised his head and looked at Gouda, who quickly disappeared into the sky. "Mr. Ray Minkai is just like what Mr. K said. As long as it involves the princess he wants to protect, Mr. Ray Minkai will always choose to prioritize the princess." Listening to McGillis's exclamation, Lou Lucio shook his head slightly. "Because of this, he is called the Knight. Then, Mr. McGillis, it's time to make a choice." McGillis laughed a few times, but there was a hint of calmness in his eyes. "Mr. K, do you know, many times, I don't feel like I'm a human. I don't feel the friendship, love, and trust unique to humans. There's only one thing that can make me feel strongly about this world." McGillis slowly clenched his right fist as he stared in the direction where Gouda disappeared. "I thought I had gained power that could let me get rid of that nightmare, but reality told me, that's not enough. Not enough. Not enough." McGillis repeated this word again and again. "Not enough. It's not enough at all. In order to get rid of that nightmare, I learned power, used power, and successfully escaped from the cage. But at that moment, I fell into a new cage. In order to get rid of all of this, and in order to stop this endless cage, I need to be strong, stronger, more powerful. And in today's world, the symbol of the strongest power, the supreme power that represents Lars Horn, it's called Bailai." Chapter 725. The atmosphere at the election venue became more and more solemn. As the roar outside the window became clearer and clearer, the counselors who already knew the truth of the matter suddenly felt that the seats they were sitting in were not very good places. Restless? Perhaps there was. But more than that, they were anxious about where the next development would lead. Especially the counselors led by Elise and Shermiao Donggu's faction. They were different from Only Frere and her supporters, who had already arrived at the venue and was currently the most likely to become Abro's representative. To be able to hold on until now was the greatest effort of Elise and the others. Fortunately, opposite them, the seat that Only's faction was crowding around was still empty. It was rumored that Only Frere, who had arrived early, did not immediately enter the venue to wait for the election to begin. Instead, she stayed in a room in the venue to discuss something with someone. It was not hard to guess that this so-called someone was probably Isnerio Farid, who had mobilized the troops under Lars Horn and entered Edmonton. Elise turned his head slightly and looked at the counselors around him who were gritting their teeth and persevering like him. Then, he looked at the counselors from Only's faction who were confident but had a hint of doubt. He suddenly felt that things would not go smoothly. Only Frere, who was about to become Abro's representative, also felt the same way. She was walking back and forth in her high heels. The sound of her walking back and forth in the room made the man sitting in the middle of the room frown slightly. Calm down, Only Frere. It hasn't reached the point where it can make people restless to the point of restlessness. Hearing this, and Frere stopped in her tracks, but her face was filled with anxiety. Calm down? How do you want me to calm down? That man, that Shermiao Donggu, has probably already entered Edmonton. Didn't you see that the Iron Flower Regiment escorting him is already fighting with your soldiers outside the city? Even though she was currently the most popular candidate for Gao Da's new representative, Only Frere was still very wary of Shermiao Donggu. It was because she was different from Shermiao Donggu. The reason why she was the most likely candidate to become the new representative of Abro was that she had the support of Isnerio Farid, the head of the Farid family, one of the 7-star families of Gallahorn, which was a behemoth. Otherwise, she wouldn't be a match for Shermiao Higujijia, who had the support of many local counselors. Calm down. And Frere. Now, all you need to do is think about the speech you will give at the inauguration ceremony. Leave the rest to me. The man sitting in the middle of the room slowly stood up, picked up his cane, and walked to Only Frere step by step. It seemed that he was tired of Only Frere's annoyance. Did you hear that? And Frere. If you still want to be Abro's representative, then do as I say. Now, you don't have to worry about those noisy clowns. For some reason, Only felt an extremely terrifying aura from Isnerio Farid standing in front of her. It was as if there was a terrifying monster standing there, emitting a terrifying aura that could devour and Frere at any moment. It was terrifying. Lord Isnerio. Only retreated continuously until her back was against the wall. Only then did she stop. Go, Only Frere. Go and prepare to take the position of Abro's representative. Don't forget our agreement. Hearing that Isnerio wanted her to leave, Only Frere immediately acted as if she had been pardoned. She quickly turned around, opened the door, and bowed to Isnerio Farid. Then, she closed the door and left. Her actions were as smooth as flowing water, almost surpassing Only Frere's understanding of her own speed. Only Frere, who had escaped from the room with great difficulty, stopped in the empty hallway. Her legs went soft, and she uncontrollably fell to the corner of the wall. Fortunately, everyone was in the venue. Otherwise, someone would have seen the usually domineering strong woman and Frere lose her head out of fear. Just now, what exactly happened? That lord actually has such a side? A monster? Outside the Parliament building, Shermiao, who should have arrived, was standing in the shadows. She stared at the door that was guarded by Lars Horn's soldiers. Teacher Shermiao, what's the matter? There's not much time left. Eudelia did not see anything strange about the Parliament building. No, maybe I'm thinking too much. After a moment of silence, Shermiao shook her head, trying to throw away what she felt in that instant. No, you're not thinking too much. There's something wrong, but that's not something you can deal with. What you need to do now is to complete your mission. However, State Zero's words confirmed that Sure Meow's intuition was not wrong. However, towards the end, State Zero told Sure Meow and Gidelia to ignore the strange feeling and focus on completing their mission. Is that so? Then, I'll have to trouble Sir State Zero. In the shadows of the street, a looming shadow soared into the sky. Facing the cold wind, it flew over the heads of Lars Horn's soldiers guarding the Parliament building and landed in front of the door. Bang! A muffled sound came. The soldiers guarding the gate subconsciously looked back to check the situation, but they only saw the gate swaying in the cold wind. Although they were puzzled, they could not find any suspicious targets. Lars Horn's soldiers could only return to their posts and continue guarding the surrounding streets. Therein, after a while, Sure Meow and Gedelia's figures gradually appeared in front of the hall's door. Although the door was closed, they could still hear the sound from inside. "We're here, Teacher Sure Meow." In the next second, the fully armed Gao de Barbados followed closely behind the black shadow. "Sorry, I'm late." The voices of the three suns and moons sounded. But Xiao Hong just smiled. "No, you came just in time." Akihiro's left hand suddenly pulled back, and Gundam Gusion fiercely waved his left hand. At the same time, the shield carried the sound of wind and thunder, and at the same time, it heavily slammed Gretz, who was attacking from the left, to the ground. Bang! The terrifying force set off a loud boom as Grez fell to the ground with a loud thud. This was not the end. In order to defeat the enemy as soon as possible, Xiao Hong did not hesitate to let Gao de Gusion pull out his sword and directly pierced through Gray's cockpit. "You, damn space rats." The sudden reversal of the battle situation made the Gray's pilot, who was holding back Gao de Gusion, in disbelief. The moment the unknown anger surged, the Gray's pilot did not retreat. Instead, he wanted to raise his battle axe and pounce on Gao de Barbados, who was the closest to him, to avenge his dead teammate. But he could not touch Gao de Barbados at all. This was because the moment he launched the attack, the meteor ship had already appeared behind him. Hey, where are you looking? I'm here. Add Lars Horn to the big shots." Under the blazing sun, Meteor raised its battle axe high and smashed the last Grez from the back in one breath, leaving a dent in half. The battle ended, and the Gray's team was completely annihilated. Phew! Is it finally over? Xiao Hong heaved a sigh of relief. Since Anchorage, Akihiro had followed the Iron Flower Regiment all the way to the south under the guise of Shurmao Donghu. He finally had the chance to remove his disguise and mount the Gundam Gusion to fight for the Iron Flower Regiment. After that battle, Akihiro finally realized that he belonged to this battlefield. No, it's not over yet. Sanryu looked at the quiet surroundings, and after confirming that Lars Horn would not launch another attack in a short period of time, he said, "We can go back and have a good meal." "Good, let's go back." Sino jotted down another good battle record of his own, and agreed with a boisterous grin. When the news of the Gray's team's defeat spread to Edmonton and to his Nereofard, it was already time for Sure Meow and Gidelia to appear at the venue. Even though his Nereo did not go to the venue personally, he, who had been observing the changes in the venue, naturally knew that Infrari's momentum was gone. Even with his Nereofard's support, and even if she could forcefully take the position of Abro's representative, she was already an arrow at the end of its flight. Being able to support Infrari to this point was already his Nereofard's limit. Otherwise, Lars Horn would be jointly resisted by the various economic circles, or even rebelled against. It was for no other reason than his Nereofard's blatant interference in the internal affairs of the economic circles. As expected, mud can't be helped to grow a wall. Forget it. This is where his Nereofard's limits end. Looking at the blonde girl in a red dress, standing on the podium and giving a speech on the screen, his Nereo smiled faintly, not at all discouraged by the failure of his plan. In fact, he was even angry. Perhaps it's time. Outside the window, the slowly setting sun could be seen. The afterglow of the setting sun reddened the sky, as if it had been dyed red by an endless tide of blood. It was bright and dazzling. Perhaps, in his Nerio Fard's mind, this scene was extremely similar to a scene that had happened 300 years ago. Awaken, together with Lars Horn, the starting point of the Fard family's rise to the pinnacle. Awaken, he muttered to himself, but no one heard him. But the moment his Nerio Fard uttered those words, in the depths of an unknown valley on the outskirts of Edmonton, a beam of cold light suddenly appeared. The nightmare called extinction had awakened once again. Along with the awakening of this nightmare of misfortune, a terrifying beam of light erupted from the depths of the valley and pierced the heavens. At this moment, the terrifying calamity that had been slumbering for 300 years, the human that had been forced into a desperate situation, had once again stepped into this world. Hammonds had led his army of AI servants to descend upon this place. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.